and welcome everyone. Thank you to the co-organizers here, the European Commission, Alliance for IoT Innovation, and many others. Thanks for joining this session on, well, actually it's been a little bit difficult to nail down what we wanted to talk about here. But the title of the session comes here. It is Automotive Industries and Mobility. And we will come back to why this. I'll give a little bit of an introduction to the workshop series that this is part of, the Next Generation IoT thematic workshops. And we will get a little bit of a policy context from the Commission before we go into the interventions from the colleagues. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. As Catherine mentioned to everyone, this session will be recorded and published. So please leave now if you're not okay with that. It also means that if you're watching this recording, we're very happy because actually, I mean, this ability to be engaged in dialogue asynchronously is, of course, incredibly important as we create policy, as we create innovations, as we create dialogue. Yes, please mute yourself by default. Maybe we can just see all faces in a moment, but otherwise, please turn off your video also for bandwidth considerations. The chat is really helpful in asking questions or to be used for that, and also for clarifications, sharing links to slides, and so on. So you can use the raise hand button if you want to say something, but you can also, well, raise your normal hand or right hand in the chat or whatever. If for some reason everything goes black or there's other stuff, please reach out to the technical helpline on email. My name is Martin Brunskov. I'm from Aarhus University and also the coordinator of the NGIoT Coordination Support Action focus on the roadmap for research, innovation, and deployment of IoT in Europe. So very happy to be here today to take you through today's session. And well, for the welcome, we have 2 and 3, I will say a few words, and then I give the floor to Rolf. But maybe before you actually go into the presentation, Rolf, maybe you want to just say a few words to the colleagues, then I show some slides, and then you get the floor. But maybe just a short voice from you.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Welcome to the workshop. Yes, the workshop is co-organized with Commission from the CSA and NGIoT. As Martin said, it's a series of workshops, and the unit I'm working in, the IoT unit, which is working across different sectors. And one of the key sectors at the moment are energy, mobility, and farming. So from that point of view, the workshop is in the center of the center of gravity of our activities and our future policy work. So from that point of view, quite timely and relevant, although we are in quite early stage, but I will report on that later. Apologizes for my colleague Zoe de Lind as Deputy Head of Unit. She is deeply engaged into the mobility data spaces, so I capture some of her slides and you will see it later.
Thank you very much, Rolf. Okay, let me give you a quick overview and let's dive into where we are. So this IoT and edge computing workshop series is, well, on a path to getting actually a roadmap or elements of a roadmap, you would say input for actions, for funding, for activities, policy recommendations for Europe, and of course in a global scope. So throughout the last part of 2020, we started with some broader cross-cutting technology sessions. Also, who are the stakeholders, the networks that are writing strategic research innovation agendas, and how do they align? What is IoT? What is edge computing in this computing continuum, and so on. We have put together some of these conclusions and are sharing them now here before summer. And then after summer, there will be a more firmed up version of the roadmap, which will also be shared in several events that you can join. And then we hand over the baton from the NGIoT CSA to the EU IoT CSA as the main coordination action in this field. And then we have seen in the drafts, right, Rolf? There are new coordination actions coming up. So you see, it's like a relay, and we are trying to get like a snapshot, but a well-consolidated snapshot. And of course, the various areas, it's a good question then, what is it actually, how do we delineate the different sectors? Because of course there's the traditional sectors, but also technology, and especially IoT and data, they're challenging the traditional sectors. So this is why the focus on automotive, because it's a very particular part. So it's not just any mobility, of course, there's a broader view, and we bring that broader view in. But the hardware, the whole computing continuum as it evolves over automotive is incredibly interesting for Europe. The idea of this is, of course, as always, the European added value, but maybe to just highlight that the green digital twin transformation, of course, is at the center. But it's all along the triple baseline of social, environmental, and economic values that is being the broader context. So we've done a lot of landscaping, of course, and you might find yourselves here very likely, either represented by a category or more specifically with your logo. But just to say that it's a very large field and it's very important for Europe. Here are the other workshops, and I won't dwell into that, but just to give the opportunity to say they are available online. And also you can read up what others have been saying before. So the trends we are seeing is, of course, this cloud, the centralized towards the edge, that automation, automated decision-making, AI is finding its way to every part, from just being reactive to also being proactive, from a combination of not just global infrastructures and global view, but also how does that unfold locally, technology-wise, but also the implications around. But in the beginning, we focus very much here on the technology part. That's also the focus of the first phases of the Horizon Europe calls that we have seen drafts of being discussed with the member states and other institutions. Of course, the green part is very big, and finding relevance in data rather than just hoarding all data in one big pot. And of course, the old ecosystem perspective, where it's not narrow chains of value, but it's value networks that are unfolding, and of course that's complex. So that's what we are here for, and that's why we need you. We need your input for sure. And with that, Rolf, I think I will give the word to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martin. So I try to share my screen. All right, you should start seeing it. Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's good. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks so much. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about IoT in far edge, automotive industries, and mobility. Actually, we are the launch of a new Horizon Europe work program, of new initiatives, of recovery from the COVID crisis, and many
Rolf, if you're speaking, we have lost your audio.
I think we lost you, Rolf.
Me too. Me too.
Okay. So, okay. Now we see your screen. Maybe the hiccups can be edited out, or it will be very authentic recording.
So Rolf's microphone does look like it's on, but we just can't hear any audio.
Okay, we do have a copy of the slides, right? So maybe we can pull those up just to see if that's easier. I can do that if you want. Okay, so let's see.
Okay, so he's just left, Rolf has just left the meeting and he said he's going to log out and log in again. So.
All right, 30 seconds. Thanks.
Rolf is back.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ah, okay, so let's hope it stays. So I try to share the screen again.
Yes, please.
Yep. If you, Rolf, I have your slides ready also, just in case, so you can always just not share the screen and I can do it. No problem.
Okay. All right, can you see now and can you hear me?
We can see
Yes.
you and the slides and hear you. Yes, please.
Okay, I try to start slowly again. Let's see, I don't know where you lost me, but anyway, I was mentioning that the automotive sector is quite important for Europe's recovery. We are in a phase where we are up for new research and innovation programs, where we have to start recovery from COVID crisis, and we are experiencing fierce global competition. So the question is how to improve European competitiveness of European actors, particularly in the automotive domain, which is quite important for Europe, and in the digital transformation. So how to bring different actors together, join forces along platforms, and where to compete. So actually, as you know, one of the key policies of this commission, of Commissioner Breton, is the data strategy. So how to avoid that we lose our autonomy on data, on the grip of data, and how to make the most out of the data and exploit the data. So in that context, data spaces, the notion of data spaces to be created in Europe has been created. So that is supported by member state initiatives like Gaia-X and so on and so forth, in order to bring different data sets, what we have in Europe, together and maximize the exploitation of the data. You see over here some initiatives, just as an example, two German ones, Catena-X and the German Mobility Data Space. You know about the sensitivity around the data generated by the vehicle, the proposed data model by European OEMs, related to a neutral server on extended vehicle, the competition from leading electric mobility providers like Tesla, who promote a proprietary access to data, and the public data. So as such, there will be initiatives under the Digital Europe program for deployment of data spaces in order to support European infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, to have a safe place for storage and processing, but at the same time to increase the value and the utilization of data and data services and create a new ecosystem. The Digital Europe program, the launch of it is delayed. I don't know, I can give you a date, hopefully by the end of the year, but for the time being, we don't know yet a concrete date. The discussions are still going on. So to visualize what we're talking about is that a connected automated vehicle will be a source of magnitude of data surrounded by an intelligent infrastructure. And you see a bit here a sketch of a use case which was discussed as part of the Autopilot project, where the car exploits the 5G network environment in order to interact with the people on the street, with roadside units, with its environment, traffic lights, and so on and so forth. So here, for these interactions, a central cloud will not work. You need local reasoning, you need different topologies and a different computing system, what we call sort of a trend towards edge computing. So what's the workshop about? It's we talk about a decentralized intelligence, more decisions at the point of interest, which applies to e-mobility, where you need parking and charging, where you need interactions in real time with the grid for the charging. It applies, but also to a vehicle as a sensor with a multitude of new sensors and components. As mentioned, it responds to intelligent roadside units, integration of telematics data, and all that interaction has to happen in real time locally, but it will not work without also the reasoning, the learning, and the storage of historical data from a cloud system, what we call sort of a mobility data space. So there will be local interactions, there will be interactions with the cloud, and we have to find means in order to orchestrate that one. Looking at particularly for the car, the fast evolution of the technology, the onboard technology, new sensors, new radar systems, new vision systems, which requires a new computing architecture or software architecture, operating system, what we call it, for the onboard in order to comply with all these different vehicle functions. So basically, with the current architecture designed by AutoSAR in the past, I think that's it's impossible to continue with that one. It needs a radical new design, more sort of HPC side, high performance computing type, centralized architecture with new sort of interactions between the different systems. So at the same time, the car itself needs new interaction schemes also with its environment, how you organize that, how you keep control of that, preserve security and safety, which is the main domain of IoT. So to summarize these short interventions, we see a lot of opportunities around the car towards the edge and the far edge. There will be strong growth of data generated by the car, generated by its environment, collected globally. I mentioned there's a growing need for computation, and there are new chips on the market already, and that there will be new topologies for computation on the car or in vicinity to the car at the edge. That is a strong driver in order to enable real-time interactions. The data security, privacy, if you keep data local, energy efficiency, and a data aggregation along a computing continuum from the sensor to the car to the edge or the car environment towards the cloud. So I think this said, I think the cloud data will grow still with unprecedented speed in the next 5 years, but we see a lot of opportunity beyond 5 years' time where data processing will be more important away from standard cloud technology towards the edge. And that is part of the Horizon Europe work program in order to support that paradigm shift from cloud to edge to IoT. And you see the edge in the center as an interface to cloud systems, HPC infrastructure, but you also see the edge as a key element of interaction with devices to do the device management, preserve local security, interact in a distributed way with distributed devices, distributed sensors, and take real-time decisions. So one of my last slides, why we're doing that, I think we see that as a competitive factor for Europe. Edge computing is Europe's one-time opportunity to gain strength in a future automotive and computing market. What you see in the picture in the middle, you know, we have to avoid islands of installations, of data collections, of data processing. I think the car manufacturers in Europe have to get their stake together in order to come up with interoperable solutions in order to provide a seamless opportunity for the drivers. They're not bound to one OEM, not bound, not completely locked into one vendor, but benefiting from sort of a global European seamless services. And you see it on the right, you know, there are big competitions. China is a huge market. And you see also the business model of current cloud providers like Google or Amazon is quite data-driven, meaning that most of the intelligence is driven by cloud services, while we believe that there's an opportunity to promote the European approach to put more power at the edge. So that should respond to commoditization of key European industry like the automotive and its supply ecosystem, and foster the discussion on platforms and services centered on European technology and also about on a European data strategy. And that said this, we spend an opportunity under Horizon Europe work program and from cloud to edge to IoT for European platforms on the edge. I said, you know, the program should have been published. Apparently, it's not published. You'll find some pre-publication on the web, but please keep an eye when the official work program has been launched to look at the real work program. As I said, part of the platform elements are to bring the different systems and system vendors together, improve end-to-end response time, optimize operation of the car in a connected environment, looking at a new software framework or meta operating system for the edge, and defining the orchestration mechanisms across the sensor, the car, the edge, and the cloud. Thanks again for that. Thanks for your attention. I think you find reports from a recent workshop by NGIoT on the web. Also, you find a proposal for announcement on brokerage event on the 7th of July, also on the NGIoT webpage. And we're still waiting for the official publication of the work program. Thanks so much for your attention, and we try to learn from you to get further insights and promote the discussion among the stakeholders, mobilization of the stakeholders around the topic, which we feel is quite important and gives an opportunity under future Horizon Europe work program. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rolf. This was super helpful. And of course, we are all waiting for the work programs, right? But underlying both the work programs and of course what happens in industry, what happens in public sector, so people buying and selling and regulating on all levels, I think there are some quite stable elements in the analysis that are coming out now. So it'll be interesting to see then how that unfolds, certainly not just in the traditional sectors, but also what happens when, you know, the move to the edge now gets, I was going to say implemented, but maybe explored. Thank you so much. So I invite to the first part of the main block, which we call strategic agendas and positions, and that's basically where we invite the networks that are active here. So with Artemis, with Alliance, of course, for IoT innovation, and so on. I mean, people who have worked with strategic agendas and hear their positions, because I mean, we're not starting from scratch here. Lots of people are trying to understand what's happening. So the role of NGIoT as a CSA looking towards the roadmap is, of course, to learn from what other people see as well. And we put some main points together. We're not trying to duplicate, nor do we have the resource to duplicate all the work of these excellent colleagues in Europe and around the world. So now it's my very great pleasure to invite Christian Prehofer to take the floor. Christian, if you could just introduce yourself briefly and take the screen. So very warm welcome to you, and looking forward to hearing what you see. And then after this, we will invite Francois and have a short discussion with the two of you before moving to the next session. Thanks a lot. Christian.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Let me get started. I think, okay, now I can. Okay, good. So I hope you can see my screen. So
Looks perfect.
Okay, very good. My name is Christian Prehofer. I've been working in IT, telecoms, and now for a couple of years in automotive industry. And my main association is now Denso Automotive in Germany, and also associated with the Technical University of Munich. And in this presentation, I just want to recap a couple of trends and then try to look a bit into future. What are the needs and what are the things to come? Of course, I can follow up a bit the nice presentation from Rolf, and you will see, of course, a number of connecting points. So let me get started to recap a bit what's actually happening in automotive industry at the moment. So this is a slide which reflects this slogan called CASE, connected, autonomous, electric, and shared and services, which is, I think, a widely accepted trend in Europe, Asia, and many other places. But it's good to, again, look at this, even though you have seen this many times. Autonomous driving is, of course, a major challenge for automotive industry, which means we have to put in lots of additional high quality sensors into the car. We need enormous processing power. And of course, we also need connectivity for updated information on maps, traffic, environment, and also updating the services themselves. So autonomous cannot really work without connected. And the same thing for electric. Of course, for electric, the major new piece is the battery. But apart from this, all the charging, the battery management, all of this requires connectivity as well. I mean, when you're looking for charging, you need to pay for charging. This is all electronic. You cannot pay electric charging by cash. Yeah, even credit card is not really possible. You need a connectivity device, a mobile phone, and then you can pay for your charging. Yeah, connected is of course another big trend. People are used to have mobile phones, computers all day, and when they are spending a few hours in the car or just a few minutes, they also want to be connected and use the same digital services or new kinds of services inside the car. And furthermore, we see a lot of new services around the car, from car sharing to flexible kinds of ownerships and new ways of sharing transport and connected transport. Yeah, so connecting different modes of transport more easily. So these are this is just a snapshot of the current trends, and clearly the connectivity and IoT, what we discuss here today, is central to all of them. It's of course for connected, but also for the others, it's very important. And the third point is that all of these changes kind of happen at the same time, even though already one of them is quite a major, or each of them is already quite a big change in automotive industry, because it changes the way devices are produced, how devices are used, and also to some degree the business model of cars. Yeah? I think that is to some degree obvious for shared services. For connected, it also means there's new business players. For electric, it's typically a connected battery and charging, which changes the business. And same for autonomous, it enables new business models. And so that's, in a sense, the setup. And now when we are coming back to IoT and technical topics, we should, of course, keep in mind that this is now posing enormous challenges on the connectivity, because cars produce enormous amount of data. And sometimes they also need enormous amount of data, like software updates, updates of high definition maps, and of course, continuous traffic information and so on. Entertaining millions of cars which are connected and have such big data need is definitely a challenge from technical side, but again, also from a business side to accommodate the cost for this. So let's look a bit in more detail, just to recap the basics here. Even though everybody talks about IoT and edge and cloud, I think it's still good to spend a few minutes just to recap the basics a bit. So let's get started on cars and IoT devices in this setup. Clearly, we have lots of very powerful sensors which create enormous amount of data. So sometimes a few terabytes per hour if you take the raw data with multiple cameras, radars, and so on. So that's enormous amount of data which you basically cannot store unless you put a big rack of hard disks in your trunk. Or if you have a super powerful network. But on the other hand, the computing is always limited. And the main factor here is, of course, the hardware cost, but even more problematic is energy for computing, and in addition, the cooling for computing. Because if you put in high power computing, you may even need air conditioning just to cool the processing. So that's the limited power. In addition, networking and storage are limited. So even though you can do a lot of stuff conveniently inside the car, and there are, of course, a number of initiatives to put more processing in the car and put an edge device which is flexible and can accommodate new kinds of services, put it into the car. That's of course possible, but there are drawbacks and it may not be suitable for any kind of cars. So then when we move to the edge computing, which would edge computing outside the car, it would be connected over wireless channel, which is good. But still, of course, wireless channels can also cause some delay, but it would still be a bit faster than connectivity to the cloud. And we don't have to send all the data to the cloud, which reduces cost on the backhaul network, on the cloud processing. That's the positive side, and can also enhance privacy. But on the other hand, for many services, you also need a global picture. So for instance, if you want to do predictive maintenance on certain pieces of cars, you really want to have the data from all cars to actually do a proper analysis what's happening in your cars, and if, let's say, some brakes or tires need to be replaced. If this is working, maybe at some point you can move it mostly to the edge, or there is also techniques for edge-based learning like federated learning, but even that still has a number of challenges. And then, you can, of course, look at the cloud, and that is a kind of new business which has been established very successfully in the last, let's say, 15 years. And even though a lot of people, for good reason, are a bit hesitant to move all their data and computing into the cloud, it has been enormously successful because it relieves people of a lot of, let's say, easy sounding but still difficult challenges, like managing your hardware and software, making sure that security is always on the latest state of the art, installing updates properly without failures. So all of this is why a lot of people prefer to shift their computing into the cloud. And secondly, it's very flexible. If you need more computing, you just press a button, and it starts to be very convenient if you just press a button instead of getting new machines. And finally, it also has very good economies of scale because data centers can basically run 24 hours per day. And if it's not used, let's say if it's dark in Europe, they can work for other continents where people are still in the office. And also in terms of energy consumption, then the computing moves to places where energy has lower cost. Yeah? So that's the kind of advantages of cloud computing. And we basically face the big challenge in automotive: at which place can we do the processing in the best way, depending on the application and a number of factors. And of course, the factors we just heard in the last presentation, like Gaia-X, can also help us to ensure things like privacy in cloud-based systems and data exchange. And of course, the kind of emerging edge computing infrastructure can be very helpful. But on the other hand, it requires to set up a new ecosystem of edge computing, which has to compete against existing markets and existing ecosystems, unless you say it's just an extension of a cloud. So that's a bit basic discussion for the topics here. And now let me show a slide a bit about automotive platforms. So even though we're talking mainly about IoT, the changes which we just discussed in terms of autonomous and connected and electric also have very big changes on the vehicle design and platforms inside. So traditionally, automotive systems were built in a more integration-oriented design. You had, of course, the OEM responsible for the complete car, but getting complete subsystems from suppliers, which were then integrated into a fully functional vehicle. And the biggest challenge, of course, was always not just horsepower and fun, but also safety and reliability. So even though everybody enjoys connected cars and fancy features, still a car is a device which just should not break down. Yeah? And that's always been the big challenge in automotive, to get this kind of reliability, which is now extremely high for such a complicated product, which is used for so many years with this huge amount of mileage. Yeah? And in order to make this more flexible, people have been working on component-based systems like AUTOSAR in classic setup and adaptive. So like we just heard in the last presentation, AUTOSAR is under a lot of discussion and changes because the classic architecture is not sufficient for the new kind of requirements. And then even for infotainment, cockpit, and external platforms, AUTOSAR is maybe not designed for. So we need other platforms, and this is where people are looking more into IoT, into internet world or IT world. And in IT world, you typically have software platforms and applications, and this is increasingly also getting into the car. And you may know that most of the big IT companies are platform companies, which live from a platform which allows others to innovate on top. So it's not just your own innovations, but you benefit from all the ecosystem and the innovation in the ecosystem. And what's happening in the platform world, and this is actually quite important for the edge computing and cloud computing, is the trend to container platforms, which allow easy management of computing entities called containers, which is in simple terms a lightweight virtual machine. And that is now the kind of de facto standard for lots of cloud computing environments, and is really under discussion for edge computing, of course, because it already has an inherent distribution of computing, and it's even under discussion for automotive platforms inside the car. So that's a bit of recap of many trends in automotive to set a bit the stage. And I think now we have more presentations and time to discuss what's next and how to address these challenges. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian. It's really interesting to see. I mean, there are many things popping up. So maybe also the parallel, from the computer, like the mainframe, the PC, the embedded, right? I mean, so operating systems, which conditions do they, operate? What are the resources and how do you relate? What is considered like internal and really you can rely on and whatnot. And then also the virtual machine. We're talking about digital twins now, which of course is very, very, right. I mean, it's a very fluffy term as it's used, I think, generally. But of course, what is a digital twin if not basically virtual machines with some models around them? And they could have 4 wheels or 2 wheels, or I mean, so it's really interesting to see how these computing concepts also converge. But maybe we can come back to this a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting. If you read up, the term Internet of Things was created about 20 years ago by Kevin Aston. And the first notion of Internet of Things was actually to create a virtual representation of a physical object, which would be identified by RFID. It was not even about connecting. So it was the earliest precursor of your digital twin.
Yes, and I mean, I can share. I have a degree which involves semiotics. So this part about I have digital representations that are then put into digital models. Yes. So I mean, understanding this, that's part of programming language theory since also quite some time. I mean, how do we represent phenomena, and then how do we chain them when they have been represented, not just formally or virtually, but also they have to run on some hardware at some point, right, as the engineers would point out. Okay, very, very exciting. Thanks, Christian, for bringing this here. Again, I would say thank you for sharing your voice here. Maybe we can now first introduce Francois Fisher, and then maybe come back to a little bit of a discussion, see the connections here. Thank you very much, Christian. Francois, I hope you are still with us. I see your screen now, at least. Now we just need full screen. Thanks for joining us. And I can share that we were both coordinators of one of the large-scale pilots, right? So you were the coordinator for Autopilot, mentioned also by Rolf before. So what happens when we do these things, at quite large scale? So maybe you can reflect back to this. And I was so lucky to be coordinating Synchronicity, which was sort of the integrated view from the urban perspective, where mobility was certainly a thing, and we did pilots on that, but it was one among many where data was sort of the common factor. So really nice to be joining the voices here again. Maybe you can introduce yourself just briefly, also your role in the Alliance and so on.
Yes.
Please take the floor, and thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Exactly, we are brother in arms in this brother project. 5 big large-scale pilot projects that we coordinated until last year for me, so April 2020. Then I moved back to my consulting company, and I'm now still chairing the mobility working group in IoTi, and adapting, the IoT for mobility processes. I would like today to present quickly a vision about data processing and edge intelligence, but mainly my focus will be on data. So the main question is what data? It's a very important issue. The objective of what data do we need to consider for data spaces, but also for connectivity. Okay, so the agenda, maybe I can skip quickly because it's not a huge presentation. I think first of all, we don't speak about a car like an object, we speak about services. The title is Automotive and Mobility. So that's why mobility is a service rendered to users. So I think user experience is very important, and we have to understand what is the future user experience in mobility. So I represented this diagram we use in IoTI. It's about moving from home to offices or to buildings. This could be also shop, whatever. We may use different kind of means of transportation, car from end to end, or if we have long distance or congestion, other mean of transport. And one element we identify in IoTI is that the main component of mobility, so the supervisor of mobility, is now the smartphone. Because the smartphone allows you to order services. In the context, for instance, of mobility as a service, you will completely manage your mobility with your smartphone. And also never forget that you move for some reasons. So moving is not a final result. You move to go for work, to go for shopping, to go for health, to go for sport, whatever. So moving means also the reason, and the reason for moving might be also associated with moving. So you might, in the future, just say, I want to meet in a restaurant in half an hour with my friends XYZ, and then my profile will adapt automatically the best restaurant. Maybe somebody is vegan, the base place, I don't want to spend too much CO2, etc. So I think that the central part of our life is a mobile phone, which allow to select those different means of transport. But of course, cars remains in the loop because we need cars for flexible transportation in different means. So we have the mix-up between automotive and mobility, but cars are going to be also replicated together with smartphones. So you know that you can easily bind your smartphone process with your car desktop and manage the two together. In particular, it's very important when you still need to drive before full automatization. What I put it here is a difference between type of application. On the left side, you have type of applications where you don't need vehicle data. So you can even book a parking place, book also a charging place without your vehicle. Even of course, if the vehicle is needed, but you don't need vehicle data. But on the right side, you have some services where you need vehicle data. So it's also very important to consider that we have data space with vehicle data needed, so vehicle connectivity, other data sets which are independent from vehicle but more linked to user. So there are different types of data. It's very important not to be too much exclusive, but to be inclusive when we think about data spaces. I try to present here a limited, I would say, landscape about vehicle data. This landscape is really only exclusive to vehicle services. Yeah? So this means when we go towards more services for the user, like fun, heat, health, etc., it could be a bit different. But you see, there is a kind of jungle of standardization and alliance working in the definition of data sets. I mean, the definition of data set mean type of data. So on the left side, you have the usual vehicle data set, and there you see very well known standardization organization, ISO TC22, the V2x with 5G AA, ETSI, then the road infrastructure with, again, CEN and ISO, but also organization like DATEX2, TNITS providing road information from member states. So they started also to publish some data set now, some public data set. And last but not least, I think what is important to consider is mobility is about position. And position means there are a lot of spatial data. So to manage spatial data, you need also to take into account specific standards for geographic information, and the data need to be linked need to be integrated sometime in some GIS system. So these organizations are also very important, like W3C, OGC, etc. So the conclusion here is that there is really a huge amount of different organizations providing type of data and rules to utilize those data. So maybe one day we have to think about harmonization. Now about infrastructure, we got some lessons learned from electric vehicle charging, but also the V2G use cases, which seem to be important to deploy efficiently electrification. There is a need of open collaboration with different stakeholders. So it has been highlighted that we need DLT, we need a neutral and open service platform to ensure the different stakeholders can be engaged in a business process. Evolution, I think I saw already interesting presentation of evolution like AutoSAR, for instance. I think here I'm presenting a bit something similar on the left side. It's a slide from Open Synergy, provider of a solution for virtualization for vehicle. So that was mentioned by Martin as well. I think virtualization will be the next step in vehicle architecture, also including high power computing. So instead of tens of ECU like high-end cars, having now, we will have very high power computing, meaning one top ECU and use of virtualization to share ECU among the different needs, but also to share devices. So we will have some kind of device virtualization. There is also ongoing standardization from Oasis on this topic. So this will very much change also the ecosystem. Yeah? If the car is becoming more powerful, if we boost the IT power of the car, of course, the application and the need for data will evolve significantly. Of course, 5G, 5G AA, I think 5G is connectivity for the industry. So it's a completely new paradigm to allow new processes using mobile network connectivity. But we have also other aspects like augmented reality. Augmented reality is also going to change very much user experience. And there also we have specific needs of spatial data, so to localize data, but also to find an orientation of data. So there are really new kind of how to say processes to generate and curate those data. Some aspect I did not hear a lot with my work on ITS, but I think it's very important. You know, the European Union has made a very good, had a good directive on spatial data. So how to share spatial data provided by member state. It's a EU-inspired directive. I think it's a very interesting instrument. Currently, it's focusing on certain thematic like environment, but not much about mobility. So I think this would be interesting to discuss with those services how to add much more mobility data to be shared by member states. So for reminder, TNITS is already pushing some member states to share interesting data. Conclusion, edge computing, because it's one of the topics. So it's of course expected to boost mobility because of course it makes sense to manage locally data which have only local relevance to save resource in transporting data, but also it is essential for time critical data so that the data set can be managed in due time. Now the question is how to develop architecture mixing up cloud to edge computing. I think there are also interesting projects in Horizon Europe about this topic. Concerning data space, my conclusion is we have a very complex standardization ecosystem as shown earlier. Something I would say being archipelagos. mobility data are also special data, so it's very important to understand it's not only data sent by a source, it's data linked to map. And also, last but not least, the EU data strategy, I think, would be interesting to leverage Inspire, not Inspire, excuse me, to allow member state data access, but also to maybe trigger effort for member state to share more mobility relevant data. So at EU level, how to create open space for mobility data, that's the main question. And I think there are ongoing discussion now with fair policies also to access those data. The question is, can also GaiaX play a role, get a lead? So these are questions I've personally in mind, but I leave it up to you to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francois. Lots of things in there, very data centric. And I also like that you leave all the difficult questions to, well, the group here, and I guess also for the upcoming programs. Yeah, so the conclusions, maybe just here. So you mentioned Inspire, and we know, and I mentioned in the beginning, what others, including myself, have been looking at. So how do we actually manage this T shape, where you have verticals and then you have actually data going across? You never know if you know, a data point is relevant for healthcare next moment, or for you know, security, or for whatever economy, and of course exactly. But the point is, of course, you can put all the data in one pot and then just analyze, right? But that is becoming so dangerous, if you will. I mean, from an operational perspective, from a sovereignty perspective, as mentioned by all from the beginning, and from a practical, even, you know, perception of creating a resilient society. So how do you think, you know, the optimal, you know, interoperability and maybe not interoperability, I mean, how does that get managed? Is that the data spaces and then something across with some regulation like Inspire, or how do you see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just raise what I consider as concerns, and these concerns are not new. I'm used, for instance, to be sometime in alliance who develop standards, and then I think, okay, we have to push it to ISO, we have to push it to SAN. But I say, yeah, what do we do here? We are just multiplying the sources. Yeah, for sure. The first step is, the first question is how to harmonize all these different alliances. If we look back, for instance, to the TISA, no, not put the pen, place the pointer. It's interesting. TISA, NDS, ADASIS, and Sensoris, they have now found a container to align. They still work independently because they have different membership, but okay, at least there are some try. But I think at the end, yeah, there should be some way to manage this. And I believe, of course, it could only be coming from institution, either institution or industry, but I rather believe institutions should, like the European Commission, should try to get some more harmonization and maybe aggregate some of the different organization, either alliance or SDO, to form only one maybe big SDO. Yeah, that's an issue. I have no miracle solution right now, but this needs to be considered.
I have to say that just the notion of creating a new SDO, a standards developing organization, is a little bit scary to me, because I think there are already so many, almost even purpose-built.
Yeah, there are many issues also when you consider the regular SDO like ISO, SAN. I think they consider maybe classical standard, but now we consider mostly open source or open source collaboration standardization process. So we don't need actually this standard Word document and so on. We just put data format on GitHub and so on. I think that there will be a need of also the classical standardization processes and unification.
Yeah, I mean, there is clearly, thank you, Aaron. I saw your hand, thank you. Well, there is clearly a market, so there's buyers and suppliers, but then there's also regulation. And then there's trade regulations, right? So how do you get open source requirements legally under the trade, let's say, treaties of the world into products? There's a lot about safety and liability and so on. So, I mean, maybe not standards with the big S, like the de jure standards from ISO, IEC, ITU, and so on, and all the specialized one, but certainly there has to be processes where we link the technical evolution, the ecosystem, the market as it evolves, buying, selling, evolving, and then actually ensuring the livelihood that are not in the systems, but around the systems. So maybe that's where you know, Inspire can be an inspiration, because it's a little bit of a mix. Aaron, I want to sorry, Francois. Okay. Sorry, you get the opportunity again in a moment. I also want to bring Christian back to the floor here. But Aaron, you have a comment or a question, please?
Yeah, a quick question. This is a fantastic presentation. Thank you for putting the agenda together.
But maybe just if you can just present yourself and where you're from, just so that everybody knows who's there. Thank you.
Yep, I am Aaron Reyes. I'm Vice President of Automotive Industrial Solutions for a company called Softtech, SOFTTEK. We're an IT and industry service provider, primarily to large industrial companies, basically US, Latin America, and in Europe. It's a great presentation and fantastic agenda. I've had a set of questions for quite a while now, which is as we move to digitize and to throw this much compute at the auto value chain, there hasn't been a lot of discussion around the sort of load economics that we're weighing down final end product with, and basically this sort of collision with CapEx. There's already a high CapEx load just to build a car, and the return on it, to be blunt, has always been questionable, basically, but we keep doing it because it's basically the most job intensive things humans have ever developed. So it sort of works out. But when we're basically adding a second car to a car from a CapEx standpoint, and it seems like that's the direction we're going in, the economics are, it's sort of like the same problem of the commons, right? It's that everybody's adding their piece, but they're not costing it. And so as you get closer and closer to the end product, I mean, I've just finished doing some projects the last 3 years with basically intelligent brake systems, et cetera, which are fantastic. I mean, you know, the final 3% of lives that we haven't saved already with all the advances in brakes, we'll probably get there. So, you know, the return on it is, in many levels, is going to be worth it, obviously, just from a safety standpoint. But it's a cost overload, because the testing infrastructure you're building, it's like you shouldn't even call them brakes anymore. I mean, it's really a completely different material architecture that we just sort of slot into this stuff called brakes, because the main companies doing it are the Bousches and, you know, all the usual suspects around the whole, brake ecosystem. So I'm wondering, all these organizations, is there any, and those of you that teach and that are part of the research ecosystems, are there any tracks that are starting to put together any of these sort of questions around the economics? And not to question it, should we even do it? Because we're obviously doing it and everyone's going to do it competitively, but that there's going to be a wall, right? There's a wall. And I remember this in regular computing in going into the 2000s, when, you know, the distributed systems started looking like mainframes, and people just said, no, we're going to go in a different direction. And of course you had 9/11, you had recession, and, you know, that all pushed it. But fundamentally, we got to a more distributed computing architecture. We got to, we got to a smaller subset, which eventually gets us to the cloud that we're in right now. I don't see that same type of framework. And so my fear is that we're just basically going to dump this load onto the existing cloud, onto the existing telco networks, which is just going to shoot back a cost model, because that's what they're really good at. And they're actually fantastic at that. But that isn't built into what people lease or buy a car for at all. And you're not going to have a $29.95 a month OnStar. You know, we're talking $100, $200, $300. I mean, there's no way around it. I don't. Right. So I know I'm asking a long-winded question. I apologize, but I usually have to set this up. What are your ideas, if you have any, or how do you see all this data getting sort of priced in? Because I've been sort of more and more concerned with it, because as I go to more and more customers, they have more and more science projects, and more of these science projects loop into final production. And I'm just wondering, like, who's going to pay for? I mean, you're building a whole new wing of data scientists, basically, your own little Google wing, and I don't see how that's getting priced in.
Right.
So, anyways. Yeah,
that's a great question. I think actually it's also very clear. I think everybody knows exactly what you're talking about, because I mean, where is the investment going to be? Because who knows if this little thing is going to be what everybody uses or it's not. I mean, it's back to the question about, so when do you interoperate, and you can use like standard components in a way and get economies of scale. Data needs to live somewhere. We have data spaces, but they're on platforms. So and we're not. So where's don't invest, or I mean, society chooses.
Or
this is important.
Or you have to build 25 more QNXs and then embed that price into everything you do as a not kind of black box, but let's call it a gray box, basically.
And probably not for every vertical there is. Christian, your answer to this, and then you, Francois, and then I think if there are no more questions in the chat, we'll actually have good input for this from the colleagues that are coming right after you. I think.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
And others will go through that. Christian.
Right. So regarding the data, it's obviously clear there is no good answer yet how to handle all the data load. But of course, a lot of people are looking into this. And there is a lot of standardization and activities around mobile networks, how to enhance this for vehicles and how to handle data load. When it comes to the car itself, I think we also raised a couple of points that the complexity goes up enormously. And that's a big pressure for the car manufacturers in terms of cost, especially about integration of all these components. And there is a lot of discussion about changing the architecture in the vehicle. So it's becoming more like a computer on wheels with a mainframe in the middle, and then a lot of connected sensors, and the software is getting a lot more flexible. So there is a lot of things happening, but that does not answer your question about economics. That is clear, but on the other hand, there is a lot of new opportunities. So for instance, a big problem is that cars are, as you said, expensive and complex, and they're not used so much. Most of the time they're just standing outside or inside. And on the other hand, if you have connected cars which you can share, or autonomous cars, they can drive themselves to a place where they are needed. So you could also drive up the utilization quite a lot if the car is driving to the customer and not the customer is walking to the car. So there is, of course, this is of course a complex question, but there is also a number of activities and answers to this.
Yeah, and of course, so we're talking automotive as if it's one simple category. Now there's micro mobility, right? So the sub half-ton segment, and there's do you invest for miles? Do you invest for smiles? I mean, all these things are happening. So the market is moving a lot. So Francois, please tell us, how do we fix this and make a solid economy and investment plan?
Okay. Now, I think from car point of view, cannot answer directly, but yeah, it's correct that we have more and more IT power in the car, lots of more application, the game is going to change because now we go to electrification, so it's somehow simplification of traction for sure. The fact that there is more software now, I think that the collaborative approach like open source allows also to reduce costs. So because you have not only 10 developers in the team working on software, but sometimes millions of developers working on software. So you see Android Auto. So Android has not been designed specifically for car, but you can reuse the knowledge for other verticals. So I think there are means to elaborate on reducing, increasing cost of software by more sharing results for sure. Now the ecosystem is going to change economically, of course, because if cars are less sold, I think there is a trend to reduce usage of car everywhere. Sometime in countries, I just recently read that Swiss want to drastically reduce usage of car by 2050, etc. But car is a mass market. This means the price for car and the capacity to access a vehicle is defined by the mass market. If we go from a mass market to the kind of market, this means that not everybody will be able to access car, and there will be need for other business models. The issue will be for people who are not living close to public transport, so outside of cities, etc. That's why the impact is not only an economical impact, but also a societal impact. So there are a lot of questions in front of us, for sure.
All right, so I think that was a good answer, Aaron. I don't know if you got like complete bang for the buck here. These
it was
are
great.
complex
No,
issues.
I mean, I don't have an expectation that there's some magic answer, or else we'd all be in a venture capital company together making money. But,
yeah. But I mean, it's interesting to see the financing sources. So now there's big investments. There is the Recovery and Resilience Fund in Europe. There's the Build Back Better. Now there's the G7. There's the, I don't know. There's so much investment in this. So obviously the investment is there, and actually in many ways. So it doesn't seem that we lack. It doesn't seem that we lack either actually political will or financing. We need to understand how to make it work, in a market and so on. So it is complicated. Thanks a lot. And I hope, I mean, for us, I mean, we're taking notes, and certainly we're bringing together also input for the upcoming roadmap. And please continue to comment. All right, I'm going to take us to the next hand for Christian and Francois, virtually even, but thanks for taking the time and for being with us, and everyone, of course, to join, but we're still here, so the panel. All right, so actually, I think we will be discussing more of these issues as we're coming up now. We did a little bit of reorganization. Lonneke is going first from Edwarde in the Netherlands and the Open Charge Alliance. Then Adnan from Danintra, also on chargers a lot. Andre from Ubiware, Massimo for the Council of Messina, and Sami from Helsinki. So really we end up on the integrated views, and maybe we even will hear about the road to digital twins in the end. So I'm now just going to ask Lonneke if you are here, and if you can take the floor, then the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I have a few slides to share.
Okay, so, very good.
Yes.
Right, so let's all close our videos and let Lonneke take the floor.
Okay, so
confirm where we can see.
Yeah. Please let me know what you can see. Okay, so
we can see something very blue, and
yes.
So,
that's the right slide.
Thanks. And if you can introduce yourself, that would be very nice. Thank you.
Of course. So hello everybody, my name is Lonneke Driesen, and I work for an organization in the Netherlands called ELAT-NL, and we were founded 10 years ago by the Dutch electricity grid operators who wanted to learn more about electric vehicles where are things going, and with a special focus on what would be the impact electric vehicles would have on the electricity grid. That's our domain and our responsibility. And of course, you know that electric vehicles need to charge their batteries, and they need an electricity grid to do so. So for utility companies, it was really important to start learning about this topic. We've been on this topic for 10 years now, and we've learned a lot, but the market is still very early stages. So we are still very active in that respect. The directorates we usually work with are DG Energy, of course, and DG Move. And I'm really pleased and happy that Rolf invited us to join this DG Connect initiative. So many of the first words that you all are using are new to me, although I think that there are so many similarities that we'll have an interesting discussion. So I counted, we are 32 people in this meeting. I'd love to do a poll, not right now because we haven't prepared it, but how many of you already drive an electric vehicle? So how many of you already are in this future method of transportation? If you are already driving a vehicle, electric vehicle, you know what I'm about to tell you. And if not, I hope you find it a bit interesting. So if you look at this blue, very blue picture for one of the 4 transitions that's currently happening that Christian mentioned is the transition to an electric powertrain, so charge electric vehicles using a battery. And that means that the automotive industry as an industry is going to connect literally, but also figuratively, to a whole new industry, the utility industry. Those are 2 entirely different worlds, and they are working together. They have to work together. And that brings a lot of dynamic and a lot of interesting topics. If you look at it from a perspective of a utility, an electric vehicle is, of course, extremely interesting because it provides flexibility to the grid. So you can absorb at times a surplus of renewable energy that is maybe abundantly available in the grid, but there's no demand for it at that time. And you can use electric vehicles to temporarily absorb it, either for driving or just store it in the battery of the car. And at a later point in time, you could provide it back to the electricity grid at times when there is demand, but there is no energy or no renewable energy available. So I think on an all-encompassing scale, electric vehicles are, of course, a new way to drive. It's good for the environment, but it also provides a solution for a lot of different industry players. The pictures that I've seen previously are about edge and cloud, and that sort of also applies to electric vehicles and particularly the charging. In this picture, you see a sort of a stylistic car and a charging station, which is a new industry, by the way, that's emerged over the past decade. And there are connections there, not only electrical connections, so the power flow, which is of course primarily what you need to charge a vehicle, but there is also more and more sophisticated information flow. So there's a lot of information passing from the vehicle to the charging infrastructure to the utility company and back. And the information concerns, of course, very pragmatically the information you need to actually charge a car. But it also provides a lot of other interesting data for load balancing, for consumer services. So it opens up a lot of new possibilities. The possibilities it opens, for instance, to address Aaron's concern about growing costs. What it also does, if you have more and more connected and more intelligent vehicles, although it costs more money to implement it, it also unlocks a lot of value. And one of the new values these types of vehicles unlock is for utility companies. A utility company is a very capital intensive industry. So for instance, grid operators spend billions and billions of euros in the infrastructure, the physical cables and transformers in the electricity grid. if you can use data information from electric vehicles to do planning, you can actually save billions of euros as a utility company in grid investments. So although it might seem that investments in connected vehicles and intelligent vehicles is a cost, of course it is a cost, but it also provides a lot of value that could provide a business model for automakers. So the information or the consumer depends on where that market model goes. So for utility companies, electric vehicles can provide a lot of value for them to either absorb renewable energy or to reduce their investments into the grid. So that's just something that I wanted to share with you. So we see it more as a great value, an added value that we can all benefit from. One other aspect, and the slides that have been presented before also illustrate this, is that there is a lot of development still needed. We're at the early stages, and there are a lot of different parties involved, dozens, hundreds, even thousands of individual companies that all need to work together, speak the same language, on the one hand compete, because we need a lot of competition, because we're by no means we are there yet. So we can't rest and say, okay, the situation of the industry and the technology and the market today is fine, let's keep it as it is. We need a lot of development, so we need a lot of competition, but at the same time, we need a lot of cooperation because it's an interconnected system. So how do you balance both competition and cooperation and not just opt for one big single vendor, like one big Apple system or one big, if you speak about electric vehicles, one big Tesla system? It might be easy if everything is handled by one party, but it's not at least what we at ELAT believe in. And I also think not what is very fit for Europe. So then you come to the topic, which I've already heard previously about standardization. So standardization is, of course, a way to define a common language and agree upon common market models. So also in the world of electric vehicle charging, there is a lot of standardization ongoing. But what also was mentioned by, I think, Francois, is that particularly the OEM industry and also the utility industry are very fond of IEC standards, ISO standards. It's what they know, it's what they trust. And it's, of course, very understandable. But the procedures there are also quite slow. And sometimes there is a mismatch between the speed the standardization work develops on one hand, which is good, but the rapid growth and changes and development of the market on the other hand. And that is where sometimes less formal standards organizations come into play that are more agile, that can move more quickly, but who are not the trusted organizations that particularly OEMs and also legislative organizations and utilities usually prefer. One aspect that could maybe form a bridge is open source, where open source is also speaking the same language, working together, but it tends to be a bit more agile and fast moving. And this is something which at the moment is a topic to explore further. How can we combine the world of formal standardization organizations with open source and have the best of both worlds? But it's a topic that we've recently been discussing. So those were a few of my my insights, having listened to the discussion so far. I'm happy to be here and learn much more about digital twins and all the other buzzwords I've been hearing. I've made a lot of notes. I'm going to Google them all later on to see what that means. Sorry about that. Back to you, Martin.
Thanks a lot, Lonneke, for the very, let's say, situated overview here, and also making, again, the links to standardization. I can see, Adnan, you're coming now online, and I mean, we have been working together on the Danish side to actually come up with guidance, even what is the landscape, what is, what's the vocabulary that is joined. I mean, even before going to technical standards, how do we even understand the landscape? Because we have very different vantage points, you know, from our experience in a particular industry or company. Yeah. So thanks a lot. But Lonneke, there was a quick question from Natalie, I think. Natalie, do you want to give that to Lonneke?
Yes, but probably it's better if you read it because I can hear my voice. I have a cold. Thanks. The question is the V2G systems.
Maybe Natalie, can you just present yourself just so that everyone knows who's asking and so on, just who you are and where you're from, and then the question. Yes, please. Thanks.
Sure. So Natalie Samovic, I'm based in Lisbon with Resilient Group and ERCO team. I'm chairing working group on energy at the European Alliance of IoT Innovation and working group on grids at the European Strategic Technology Energy Plan. And my question is related to the potential issue that we will face. So this new relationship that was described in the first slide between the grid operators and vehicle technology providers, third parties, is heavily nested in the new V2G charging infrastructures. And they are being created, let's say, as the new systems, and the retrofitting of the old systems in order to provide V2G services as described on that slide, and in order to facilitate all these new services, would not be possible for, you know, simple charging or non-V2G ready vehicles. So what needs to be done in order to avoid the problems in the future, basically, and what is the potential solution for this?
Okay, so thanks, Natalie. Well, what I can say is the way we have approached it in the Netherlands is that the system that we have started rolling out in the Netherlands 10 years ago, and also all the systems that are being rolled out throughout Europe are not perfect. Then you can do two things. You can maybe not move forward very fast, save your investment, and keep developing or working towards a better system. Or you can say, well, we'll install what we have, simple chargers, slow chargers, dumb chargers, just get started, learn, and then gradually evolve to a more sophisticated system where you can do load balancing, more sophisticated vehicles that provide power back to the grid, and then evolve. So do you opt for a revolution, like you just implement something that's much better, or you evolve step by step? And what we believe in the Netherlands, and I also believe that you already learn so much from small steps, and the change that everybody needs to go through is already so big. We should move forward in a simple fashion, knowing that the current charging stations cannot provide power back to the grid, knowing that most of the vehicles currently cannot provide power back to the grid yet. But it's a start. We learn a lot of other things. And gradually, the first vehicles come to market that can provide power to the grid, followed by charging stations. It's always a bit of a chicken and the egg, and that is the way to progress. So it is not a big bang scenario, it's an evolution.
Thanks, Lonneke. I think Rolf, you had a question also following up on this, and I think Adnan, this is setting you up quite nicely, right? This is contextually really flying in. So thank you, Lonneke, for reorganizing the program here. Rolf.
Yeah, thanks again for the interesting discussion. Thanks, Monica, for the interesting presentation. I think we know that sanitization is one of the burning issues. And since a couple of years, when we worked with pilots and horizontal action, sanitization was always on the top. But at the same time, looking what's happening on the market. The only question I have, and what I'm afraid is that talking about the energy grid and the bidirectional charging and the issues there, and we have the regulation, I'm afraid, you know, the market is moving quite faster in terms of evolution of batteries, the sales rate
think we have a small hiccup in the Ether net, Wolf. But maybe Adnan, since this is so related, we're still talking about mainly the same things. Maybe we can come back and Rolf when he resurfaces. Would that be okay for you? Lonneke, thanks so much for. I think it was really good to have this, context. So we move to you, Adnan.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. I must say, Lonneke, your presentation was a very good introduction to what I'm going to speak about. And Natalie, your question was also just down the aisle of what I'm going to talk about. So basically what I am trying just to share my presentation here. Need to go back to the beginning. So basically, my name is Adnan Osari. I'm an sole owner of a small company in Denmark making lampposts. Been in the software industry, hardware industry, satellite communications, and just a technology freak. So I have a lot of what's called connections to what's happening and so on. So, but from my perspective, the view of not quite sure, yeah. As I see it, the whole industry has a conundrum. It's kind of the EV charger opens up a lot of questions. In Denmark, there's legislation that doesn't follow what people want. We have a lot of open questions on how to solve the issues. We have anarchy when you're talking about parking places and so on. The communication between what's legal and what's not legal, how to use it and how not to. There's a lot of question there. There's a lot of question about the grid. How can we solve that? Today, as we see it, we have a lot of single chargers. We have charger clusters. We have, to some extent, load balancing in the newer systems. A lot of different systems in the pipeline. The reason why we are here is, as you see in the background, it's lamppost is an obvious place to put in a charger. Another thing is that throughout Europe, throughout the world, we have changed from old luminaires to new LED luminaires that just uses a fraction of the energy. That means that we have an infrastructure there that is probably only using half the power as what they're used to 10 years ago. So we have a capacity there in the infrastructure that we're not using. What we really miss it's the smart chargers, the chargers that take all these things that we are talking about today, communication, interacting, and so on. We are looking into some of the areas. It's load balancing that includes buildings. When you are at work, sometimes you have a lot of excess energy, but you have to be able to take into account the peak hours of the energy. So the building has, I don't know, some kind of energy limits. And what we are looking at here is some of the systems that we are working with today in the beginning, but they are installed. It's a typical building infrastructure. Let me see if I can get a pointer here. I think it was here. The building has a certain energy possibility here. It's 200 amps. It has the possibility to go up to 200 amps. We know at night it's only utilized quite little, so the cars can spend and can draw whatever energy they need, full load. But we also know when air conditioning is running, when people are cooking and so on, there's a limited amount of power available. That means that the load balance systems for this small community has to take into account that the actual grid connection is only limited to 200 amps. the systems we want to do is we want to do systems that takes this power and try to use it when needed. So this is, we are getting smarter, but still, is that the real? I need to, maybe I can, yeah. The main issue is not the grid or the power or smart load balancing. There's a totally other question that is coming up rapidly, at least in Denmark. I'm sure we're not the only area. It's the whole idea where to put the EV chargers. You have the parking lot, like on this page here. But where to put them? Do we need to have half the parking lot with EV chargers? Do we have EV chargers everywhere? How to control it? Do we need to have, like we have handicap parking, that you are getting a fine if you're parking on a handicap spot? In Denmark, there's no legislation that tells you you're not allowed to park on an EV parking space. So you could take up a parking space for EV charger and not using it for charging. So there's getting anarchy if you put up more and you dedicate these places to the cars that have EV chargers and they're not used. People start to use this because they're getting annoyed that it's not. The next thing is that the car, when the electrical car comes and wants to park, he doesn't have the space where he can charge his vehicle because that's taken up by a douchebag that has parked in his spot. We know that each parking lot has hundreds of spaces. In 10 years, we know that probably all these parking spaces needs to have a charging capability. We also need that these chargers today are expensive. We don't want to put in Denmark up 1 million chargers that's cost I don't know how much. We need to be smarter. We need to use the infrastructure and we need to use this in a smarter way. And we need to accept or communicate and use the grid's capacity that we have today. We are going to spend the next 10 years waiting on all these, all what we do, all the what's called all the processes, all the norms, everything that needs to be set up in order to make the two-way grid connection really work. But until then, we will see the sales of electrical vehicles boost enormously. We will see the lack of parking spaces that have these, and the grid is not able to respond to this. So one solution could be that we need to work in the meantime on simpler, smarter connections, where the charger is the main what's called the main components of the charger is at the bottom of the building in a big rack, and the chargers themselves is just a simple wall plug like you have it at home. You just plug in your appliances and you get your 230 volts. What you want is that you plug in your car and you have a chip reader either in the plug or in your hand, and it tells you that, yeah, now Adnan Osari is at this plug, and I know I need to bill him with his agreements, whatever is he's using on this special spot. So we're working on things like that in order to take the capacity that there is in the building and also make it scalable. So what we want to do is it's making smart cabinets, switching and load balancing, making flexibility that the cabinet down in the basement has maybe 5% capability when we start. That means that of the 100 parking lots we do with this very simple connection kind of technology, when the first 5 cars are plugged in, the 6th one doesn't have a possibility to be switched on because it's overloaded. But once one of the other cars is leaving his spot, this car will get in line and gets to be switched on, and he will start charging there. And when the number of chargers gets, I would more, it's similar to the concentrators you had in the telephone systems in the old days, where you used Erlang in order to find out how much capacity do you really need, how many load EV charging stations do you really need, and set it up accordingly to that. There is a lot of going on about software solutions. Several of our partners are working on software solution that takes these into the next step, that combines the billing, the rerouting, the smart switching, and so, and also integrates it with the load balancing of the building and the simple chargers out there. This is from one of our partners, where they have started building up this, where they are using the local area, the parking lot, and putting up simple chargers. This is an early version, but you see the chargers. Basically, what you will have tomorrow is just a plug and an RFID reader, and that's all you will have here. In here, you will set up, if you have 3 at the beginning, you will have 3 MID readers that can measure the energy and make the bill. And that means that only 3 of these 5 can be in use at the same time. But after some time, when you want, you can upgrade it to 4 or 5 and scale it up to thousands, depending on what parking lot you have. And I see this is one of the steps that needs to be done in the meantime, until we wait till the really integrated and smart grid connections. And it's also simple, because in a solution like this, you just need to upgrade the rack in the basement, or it can also stand outside at the corner of the parking lot. It can be in a connection with a office building, a private home, what's called a flat area. This is how it could look. Today you will have all chargers all around. Now this is a situation where we want to upgrade. You are able to put in like 4, and after some time you just plug in some more charging stations. But basically what we say, tomorrow we think that this real solution, simple columns that are placed everywhere where there is a parking space, and the utilization of the parking doesn't need to be an electrical vehicle that parks in front of this. It can be any kind of vehicle, and we don't have the anarchy that is slowly arising, and probably tomorrow it's really going to be a bigger issue. I have a small video I want to show you that I will stop sharing this. Stop sharing this and start sharing my other presentation here. And let's see if it works. This is a small video about an installation on the parking lot I just showed you, where we are using the So stop sharing. I will then just jump back to presentation. Yeah, and
we're about to wrap up, right, Adnan?
Yes, I'm just wanting to tell you some of our partners here. That's my last slide. So basically, we are working with a Portuguese company called Smart Lampposts. We are working with the Taco in Lithuania and Magnum Cap also from Portugal. A Danish designer called Mads Olsgaard, Rosa from Poland, Technopale in Latvia, Metallogalva from Portugal, and IPL from Ireland. And we're trying to put together some of these smarter infrastructures and are now just searching for a kind of scaled up project where we can maybe make 1,000 or 2,000 scale system. Yeah, any questions? Happy to
Thanks
answer.
a lot, Adnan. Yes, I think actually there's quite a lot of questions there. So maybe Rolf, you were frozen before. Maybe you want to pick up. You also have a question here. Aaron, if you want to go, we need to keep a little bit of pace just to ensure that there's good speaking time for everyone, including some discussion. But Rolf, if you want to comment here.
I may try if my connection stays stable. It's all day today. Many thanks, Adrian, for the presentation. Interesting. I think that somehow replies to several of the needs, particularly of housing companies, which are in the middle of providing sort of a service for the tenants. On the one hand, they're squeezed by regulations where they have to force to install charging stations. At the same time, they may be charged by the energy company if they exceed the peak capacity. Have you been in touch with those companies, housing companies, particularly in city complexes, or also office management, facility management companies?
Yes, as we are in connection with some of these and are trying to build out our connection to these. If you have any recommendations, we are all ears, if you can say so.
Maybe a quick response to that. We had a discussion in the previous panels around the city of Berlin, which exactly has the problem you mentioned, to increase the coverage for charging stations on the one hand, but don't have the place for the parking place. So looking for these semi-public spaces, as you mentioned that, and maybe we can correct the link over there and to see, whether there is a mutual interest and you can be part of one of their pilots.
Very good, very concrete matchmaking going on here. You also had a question regarding underlying standards. So maybe Adnan, just quickly, if you can respond to that question from Rolf. I mean, you are actively part of the work that I mentioned before, trying to even see what is the landscape, who are doing what, yes, and like Aaron asked before, so who does what. Can you reflect just very briefly on the role of standards here?
Yes, that's a really difficult question there, because I'm at the moment, the last year, I've been trying to get an overview of what standards to follow up, what work to go into, and what I've done in lately is joining Martin's one of the Danish subcommittees on mirror committees on smart city and infrastructure, where we just made a handbook or as Martin mentioned, a kind of vocabulary on what words to use for what and who are the players in all this. And it's really, really difficult. And on the other hand, I'm looking into the norms about road equipment, road science equipment. We are working in a Danish group, trying together with the municipality and the government to try to come up with some kind of guidance or playbook. What shall we do with the chargers? It's really a mess. And I just saw today that here per 1st of June, there's a new regulation from the government stating a lot of things about the EV chargers that are public access to, that they need to have prices on these. That means that now we need to have a standard letter head size price tag on the EV chargers. Many of the EV chargers are not that big at all. So it is really some screwed up miscommunication between the governments and what they are thinking, trying to protect everybody, and the industry trying to make these smaller and make them more fall into the background. So it's not. 10 years ago, you were happy to have a orange or purple kind of charging station or big ugly one because you were kind of stating that you are green. Today, everybody knows it, everybody wants it, everybody has it, and they need to stay in the background. They don't want them to be seen at all. They need to blend in. And all these legislations and norms are just not there. They are contradicting each other and so on. So it's really, yeah.
So I hear you saying it's complicated. Maybe you can learn something from the retail industry. So, you know, how big is the price tag? Because some products are quite small. You don't know, you know, what is the legal size and all of that.
I think one of the best comparisons is in Scandinavia. We started off with the Nordic mobile telephone industry back in the late 90s, where it's exactly the same. Everybody was fighting on their own cellular system, whereas in Scandinavia they said, yeah, we have to find some. We are not that big. We have to work together in order to make something that actually works for everybody, and that became in the back door the GSM standard, and suddenly the whole Europe was part of this, and the Americans saw that, yeah, we can see we have to do something because the roaming we have is like 5 phones when you cross the country, and they can in Europe just use one. So I see similar things going on here, that if we don't do anything, it's suddenly a Chinese standard is going, or Chinese products is going to be the substandard for this. So it's
or no product or no standard. So it has still this T shape. I see that Aaron, you have a question. I'd like to move on to Andre, if it's okay, if you can keep like a log of good things to ask. Would that be acceptable?
Is it okay if I ask him after the fact? We'll be able to come back.
Yeah, for sure. And you can also use the chat. I mean, so please use the chat also to interact with each other. Then we can keep And Andre, and thank you so much, Adnan. Very good, very concrete, literally, and also showing all the complexities. And we know that's not just you, struggling with this. And you mentioned Portugal quite a lot. And now here we have Andre Edwarde from Ubiware outside of Porto in Portugal. So Andre, please take the floor and introduce yourself. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Adnan, thank you. So I'll just share the screen now. Just so. Okay, I think you can see it now, right?
Now we can.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay. Perfect.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so LOL, I'm Andre Edwarde from Ubiware. I'm the head of future mobility at Ubiware. I've been working in mobility for a while now, more on the technical side and the standardization part and connectivity and those kinds of things. And today I'm going to try to do a brief overview of our idea, our vision for mobility and for connected mobility and automotive. So Ubiware is a Portuguese SME founded in 2007 with 2 main focus areas, so telecommunications and smart cities. We are from Portugal, and we have a great focus on research and innovation, and we developed software solutions from the idea up until the product. And we have solutions right now in more than 60 cities worldwide, and it's really these cities that help us define our vision for mobility and for our solutions, in fact. So the vision that we have for mobility is before I talk about this vision, I'd like to introduce the mobility as a service stream, which is to go from A to B in different modes of transit and don't bother with buying multiple tickets. looking up for multiple matches in different transport modes. With this stream and the help of cities, we are developing our own vision and our own products and research and innovation agenda to couple with that. So, and the main idea and the main focus is to enable mobility as a service with a single platform, a single scalable central platform. And this platform would work by centralizing the data, letting the main mobility actors to view this data, help them adopt the best strategies that are ultimately adapted to the final usage and their final demographics in apps and citizen-centric solutions. These cities have been telling us a very important lesson. The lesson is that the road to mobility as a service is very complex and has a lot of hidden issues. We are implementing this step-by-step path to gather private and public operators' data, integrate, harmonize them, standardize these data sets and web services, once again looking into the outcomes of standardization groups and coupling with de facto standards in Europe and around the world, to view everything on this central scalable platform that will help us to define use cases. And the first use cases of the platform can be analytics or multimodality, and then we should integrate more use cases as the platform lives and as the platform and the city mature on this mobility as a service scene. This platform or this vision, this strategy would help people or cities transform their mobility as a service dream or their mobility dreams into a reality. So since this is a very complex solution and very complex platform and has a lot of hidden domains, we started calling smaller solutions bundles. And these bundles, I'll start with, there's no surprise on this because we've been talking about this for a while now, but it's interoperability. Interoperability enables the silos to be connected, the domains to communicate with each other, to unlock the value of cross-context information. And we do all this by digitizing existing systems or integrating new ones, depending on the maturity of the city. This bundle is compliant and can harmonize data in that DataX2, NetX, Siri, GTFS real-time, and all these standards are the interoperability basis or the basis of a platform that allows us to have specific use cases on top. For example, clean mobility. We want to create awareness and reward more sustainable means of transportation for a greater good to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals and create a cleaner city. Right now, we are even working on a new app that we are launching, which is called Go Green. So this Go Green app helps you as a city reach the Sustainable Development Goals because it allows or it incentivizes users to leave the car at home and to use more sustainable means of transportation. We have a lot of more bundles, but today I want to focus everything on connectivity. This is just a small recap of the mobility catalog. We have the custom bundle, which allows you to do basically anything or to enable any domain on the mobility scene. For example, here on the right, you are seeing a work that we've done with Deutsche Bahn, one of the largest mobility operators in worldwide or in the world. But our vision is coupled with the city's vision. Our vision is that these building blocks, but the bundles create the mobility as a service dream. This is the mobility catalog. Everything started in an R&I project, Embers, with deployments in Porto, Tricala, Cologne, in 3 different domains. So our expertise is really to bring ideas to product and the products to the market, and new bundles are being researched and being integrated. So a little glimpse into the future and to connectivity and to the IoT part. We think that mobility is as important as health or basic services because we need to move to get to those services. So our vision for the future is to bridge mobility as a service in smart cities, to enable a marketplace of mobility as a service for citizens, to empower a citizen-centric logic, and to use novel networking technology to enable mobility as a service. And focusing a little bit on the last point, on the fourth point, data collection requires widely available and reliable connectivity. With vehicles, pedestrians, sensors, traffic lights, ambulances at the city's ecosystem or at the city's core, every one of these actors rely on distributed equipment to provide connectivity. We've seen on the last presentation the poles, the smart lampposts. We can input there some kind of connectivity for the specific part of the city, or for that specific part of connectivity. For autonomous vehicles, for example, connectivity may be seen as an extra sensor, a way to convey the intentions with other parties and to coordinate actions on a very V2X manner. So our agenda for the cooperative and connected automated mobility is to be a partner for mobility as a service and for connected mobility itself. So we've seen this association in a previous slide, but if you take a look at this specific slide from the white paper and going back to what we've been discussing, this is really how the connected mobility landscape looks like. So different radio links, different infrastructures, traffic lights, roadside signals, vehicles, VRUs, so the vulnerable road users, the pedestrians, the cyclists. All of these are being coordinated by local edge clouds. So the edge cloud is more or less a local intelligence that's relaying this communication to the cloud or not putting as much effort on the cloud as needed. So this is a very rich ecosystem with different stakeholders interconnected and dependent on one another. And they have an enormous amount of different business requirements that they need to fulfill each one. So 5G and edge cloud are clearly the key enablers for connected mobility, and this is what we are discussing today. The 5G AA is gathering inputs and requirements from the automotive industry themselves to then influence the architectural needs and deployment options, which are taken into consideration by the ETSI-MEC group and the 3GPP, which define the standards for communication and for interconnection. Which is exactly why we are focused on adopting the standards and building a platform compliant, for example, with ETSI, MEC, and new 5G service-based architecture. If you're curious about this stuff, feel free to contact us or to drop us an email. We'll be more than happy to reply. So this develops a new set of use cases focusing around safety, the convenience, automated driving and assistance, and the vulnerable road users that are right now being one of the main axes of research. And we're actually building this. We are actually on several projects that we are on, several research and innovation projects that we are building this. So a few recent ones that we are working on. So UrbSense is an edge cloud platform it's orchestrated by a Kubernetes-based service and has 3 deployments. So in Helsinki, we have it configured to deploy IoT and edge computing. In Barcelona, for example, we have edge computed and neutral hosting with 5G technology. In Aveiro, we have the 3 together. So edge computing, IoT, and 5G technology with neutral hosting. Some of the use cases that we are developing on top of this project are exactly mobility analytics and edge analytics for mobility-driven scenarios. I'm running out of time. I'll just fast forward through the project. So a second one, which is very important for us, it's SNOB 5G. So the idea behind SNOB 5G is not to add more pipes for communication, but to make the pipes that are available efficient and intelligent enough so they can route the information from the cars to the access, which are infrastructure, poles, smart cabinets, depending on what the city has, and back to the car for V2x communication. The main goal here is to make use of ETSI MEC to understand the needs of each application that runs at the edge of the network and optimize their connectivity to the network itself. We have Caramel as well, which is another product, which is another project. Right here, our contribution is to provide the MEC part of the network, or the MEC part of the network infrastructure, and the orchestration on this, doing the onboarding of new onboard units on the car into the roadside units, and doing this on a secure, safe manner, which every roadside unit understands which onboard units they can connect to. And the last one, which was just accepted, which is Right to Autonomy, in which we are deploying an autonomous bus in the city of Aveiro. This is not the final route, but this is an expected route for this bus. I am running out of time, but I'll just wrap this up. So as of today, right now, we are launching this initiative, which is the Connected Intelligence Open Lab in the with the University of Aveiro, to facilitate the experiment and IoT platforms in the 5G enabled end-to-end connectivity lab for experimentation, researchers, and everyone to come together. And our ideas for Horizon Europe is, since we have partnerships with Automotive Tier 2 from Portugal, ERT, and a telco and energy integrator, ProF Group, we want to work with them in European projects as well, so we can develop this vision even more. We are experienced on market-ready use cases, several cities, demonstrators and pilots, and mobility, interoperability, 5G, and edge computing are more or less our summary of expertise on this. Thank you very much for the opportunity, for being here. It's a pleasure to talk about this stuff on a very, very good forum.
Yeah, thanks a lot also to you, Andre, for also the continued work. I mean, you've been part of many of the activities also discussed here already. And it's good to see how this is really coming very close to the market. I mean, much of it is purely market, but to have this link, between R&D, also, testing, experimentation, then the spillover, of course, as Aaron also points out. Okay, on the very large scale, how does that then flow onwards? So I think if it's okay for you, you can put your questions in the chat, and I think it would also be great if the speakers would answer in the chat. I mean, please go ahead. I think Andre, there's already a question from you there, and maybe also you. So Adnan, please go on, and we can use like a parallel stream. Because I would like to invite our next speaker on the floor. So Massimo Villari from Messina, and thank you also for your flexibility in this slightly reorganized agenda. But I really do think that we have built up now the momentum, seeing from the very let's say the technology level and from the vertical level, and everybody mentioning, oh yes, and actually this automotive infrastructure and usage happens somewhere. And that somewhere is very much also in a place like a city. So we will have from your perspective, and then also Sami next from the city of Helsinki. So thanks a lot, and please introduce yourself and your contribution in this lively discussion, and we take it from there. Over to you. We see your slides clearly, Martin.
Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here, because I've seen a lot of really great inspiration in the area we're moving forward. And I'm full professor in Messina. I'm also the delegate of ICT, try to deal with this stuff with remote things by the COVID. Then we have tried to push the public administration on one side, university, as I just mentioned, but on the other side, even the city of Messina. And I'm going here to present some initiative that we are having in the municipality, that I want to push you in thinking how we be really good to have this edge computing in smart city, essentially. I might also my watch try to stay on time, because I know remotely it's not easy to stay on time. So I want to start my discussion with the European project, as was done before by my colleague speakers, This is the sample of Urbanite project was born essentially for the cloud infrastructure. Was not the time for Edge 2020 to think on Edge. And then I'll give you some hints how I tried by myself as let's say this kind of relationship with the project itself to push for scientific behavior, Edge. This is what we are looking for. So essentially, Urbanite is in the area of mobility. We try to give some support to department, to decision maker, urban transformation, and different use cases, of course, the area for mobility. And we have to push for the technology because we understood it's important for digital transformation. We have to take the value to make it for decision makers inside the municipality, inside the department, understand is really important. And everything by data driven, because we know for the future we need to deal with a lot of data, the data space that was also mentioned by Rolf. And repeat, I'm trying to simplify the life of these stakeholders with different aspects in terms of simulation, algorithm, Urbanite ecosystem, some forum and Sopo lab, and so on and so forth, assembly. The cities are quite important city, Bilbao, Amsterdam, Helsinki, and also Messina. We joined the use case, and that's what we are trying to present today, of course, considering the sustainability of Urbanite itself. The COVID entered in the picture. It was quite not easy to deal with this, and we're trying to use as much as possible different opportunity in different areas of Europe. If it is Bilbao in Spain, there is Helsinki, there is Amsterdam, and there is also Messina in Sicily, in south of Italy. But let's move forward. This is the consortium, just to have a rough idea of what we are talking about. I'm also part of the co-founder of Alma Digit. I'm part of, let's say, the business approach that they are pushing in Italy, that the even professor has to have the opportunity to push for SMEs, this perspective, and that's what we are working on. You see there microservice, you see there osmotic computing, something we invented in the last few years. We have IoT and edge computing, cloud computing, and all these kind of aspects are parts of the portfolio of Alma Digit. And then the municipality, as I said, is a city in Sicily, south of Italy, that in some way is interesting because it's quite close to the peninsula, the small channel, quite very famous time of Homer, and it's challenging because you have a multimodal transport between the island itself, because at the end of the day it's kind of a bottleneck toward the main island. Okay, repeat, these are the parts, partial department that are involved in this perspective. Let's go for the vision. Okay, repeat, trying to have a solution on the cloud to engage citizens, to have a new artificial algorithm, to collect data, and to provide new solution. This is try to do, as I said, by some co-creation system, data management, and so on and so forth. Good. We have a good idea about all the cloud infrastructure, but we are going toward the edge. We know it very well. And for this reason, I want to put on the table some thinking, some very useful artifacts we're trying to deploy on the edge can be really important for us. Repeat, computation at the edge, a lot also. There is also some issue with the GDPR compliance. You know that the municipality has its own data. They wanted to share it on the partners. This is why we propose to adopt at the edge framework at the edge paradigm, because we strongly believe that you need to guarantee the privacy, and the only way to guarantee the privacy is to maintain data close to the to use them, to close to the citizen, close to the city, not to put on the cloud. We know there is the Gaia X movement, the Gaia X initiative, but in any case, I strongly believe edge should be taking place. I'll give you an example. Why do you need edge? This is an example where you can have a surveillance camera. We make a paper in Urbanite recently, was presented in Melbourne last month. Unfortunately, you see here some no good picture. It was by the terrorist attack in Vienna. And what we understood, all of us tried to look on Twitter, on the web, on Facebook, how it was possible to look to the people that make these really bad things. Try to think that what you need to have some intelligence on the border. This is why we introduced some challenging aspect, that the idea is to querying this kind of requirements. You query for something from some data, from some picture, and you go there in the right location with the right machine, and you can make your evaluation. And you can do it because it's not possible to do it on the cloud. You have to do it on the edge. This can be one example. For this reason, we are looking forward to virtualizing device. This is what we are working on. We already talking about containers, Dockers, Kubernetes. Here in Messina, we're working a lot. We have many clusters with Raspberry and with some possible cameras that we try to have this kind of concept of virtual device. You have the physical device that have some limits. You see here, example, the number of frames per second is 25. You cannot increase it. But there's some reason you can have less, and you can do it by virtual approach in this perspective. And then also to have a data model. It's quite something that not easy to deal with. And this is the overall architecture. This is an edge architecture, okay? You see open fast function as a service. You see Kubernetes. You talk with the function by API. This is also the future, just there were some details in the edge we are looking. Why do you need this? Because you have to make some control. You have to click on the function to have an answer, click and you get the answer. Because this was the paradigm that the cloud in some way pushed us, and we a lot appreciated it. For traffic flow, for parking, for weather observation, you need intelligence at the edge. This is what I strongly believe. This is a graphical representation of the edge unit that is becoming to be virtual. It's not physical anymore. It is virtual with many functions as you require. And that allows you to have the right data for the right context. You can manage data. In some way, you can make a wrapper around the data, and you can deliver the data according to some trust level or some agreements, not others. You see there, virtual extension and virtual function. This is what you are working. And even using NGSI LED, just to make some characterization of what you're saying, this concrete work that we have here in Messina, using for the moment a small scale, but we want to introduce for the whole city. Again, this is the camera. Another example I want to push you is essentially the environment, is a mobility case. We are working a lot with the municipality for understanding, I don't know, the public transportation works, but even we have a new initiative with the bicycles. We try to rent a bicycle in the city, and we have a lot of data. The initiative was named the Movime Bike to Work, try to give the bicycle for people that can use it for going to school or going to work. What is the issue there? So the issue there is doesn't work the old paradigm where you can get data, you have a GPS, and you deliver data. Doesn't work. We have to put in some intelligence there because some data cannot reach the endpoint. There was some issue with battery because the bicycles are with battery, are electric batteries. Sometimes they discharge. The idea is to put intelligence at the edge. Repeat, it's not only having the GPS as we think today, but we have to put some intelligence in the border. There's some tracking line concretely. And last things what we are working, and I want to put on the table, and I will finish. We want also to collect all the cameras in the city to deploy some edge camera where you can make some computation at the edge. It's one of the main avenue in the city, Viale Boccetta, where many cars go through from the peninsula island to the main island, and they go through these. If you see here, there are no common cameras. They're cheap camera. We're using Raspberry, and the idea is to deploy when you need some different algorithm. This is essentially an idea of the edge. Even there, even the hardware device, the physical device, where you wear with the virtual edge unit for video data example. You push the function, you push the container, and you can get the service you like. And repeat, is on OpenFast, on ARP, working very, very well. And we make also comparison with the concrete cameras that you use for making analysis of traffic, but it's only for one purpose. Now our idea is to have a general purpose camera, understanding how good they are with some comparison. I repeat, the idea was not so bad. Depends also the time of the day, in the afternoon or in the morning, by the way. Okay, I go in the conclusion, if it give you some ideas what is possible to do at the edge, and we certainly believe that it will be the future repeat, not to have a massive amount of data on the cloud with many implications in terms of privacy, latency, processing, and so on and so forth. Thank you for listening. I hope to be on time, and if there is any question, feel free to ask. Thank you again, Martin.
Thank you so much for the very rich presentation, Massimo. I mean, there's so many things, but it's good to see increasingly now that we focus, okay, I mean, we cannot just do one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, charges is one issue. It's an important one, and we can see that Aaron and Adnan and others are discussing in the chat. But it's just as complicated with everything else that we deploy, right? I mean, understanding the continuum, understanding the stacks, understanding the professions around this.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, cars.
Exactly.
I mean, you have mechanics. Okay, who fixes this? So you have the public perception. You have. I mean, it's so damn complex, and you cannot just do it from the ground.
I did it on purpose to make to see the complexity, because repeat is in a domain where all of us is affected. Even a simple things when you charge a car. It seems to have it, but keep in mind, if at the next 10 years, all of us have to do it. It's complex, but it's a part of the story. As a complex looking for bicycles, as will be complex using a photovoltaic system, where you put out energy in one building, a house from the building. The scenario we're presenting are really challenging at the edge. This is what I really believe, Martin.
You invoked Homer. And I did mention that I have a classical education apart from my PhD.
Very well.
So, I mean, it's also cultural, isn't it? So the city of Messina, I mean, many people know, and you could imagine that, you know, what does the technology do to, you know, the character of the city also as a living place, not just the maybe perfect functionality, but also, you know, how it's perceived as, you know, in line with the history and the future of a place. So very short comment on this aspect.
I totally agree with you. First of all, I was thinking we have to be sustainable and not to change everything. You cannot, let's say, make a revolution on the city. You have to fill the city, okay? And the technology should come in to enjoy what for centuries you make experience in terms of food, in terms of climate, environment. It's really beautiful. It's easy, it's a challenge. Messina is not a smart city, but can be, because you have let's say, it's like an environment where you can build everything, but you can build with the right step. Today, you have to build with keep in mind sustainability, looking to the sea, having a good environment. You don't need to have massive things. I think we need a mistake all of us. And Europe is in charge of that, because in any case, we are sustainable by the culture, no? Because we wasted less land, like in other countries, in the US and so on and so forth, because we cannot do it. Another important thing I believe, we have to use technology, as we have seen, to click and go, to rent, not to everything. You should have some things when you require. This is really important. Share things, share apartments, share experience, share transportation, sharing also your car, because you need your car, I don't know, 2 hours per week sometimes happen, and let's share it. That's what I strongly believe. In this domain, all the world can benefit of it. This is what I push, and again, thank you, Martin, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Massimo. And Adnan, you talk about the complexities that are there when you want to deploy. Well, they come in many flavors. And I think actually one of the things that we realize, I mean, working globally and of course in the diversity in Europe, I mean, from north to south, east to west, you know, all the different demographics and geographics, it's maybe also not that one size fits all. Yeah. I mean, of course, we need to understand what is really the minimal that we have in common, but then maybe, you know, different things come on top, not entirely different. We still have the grid for our electricity, but maybe then, I mean, we don't. Maybe. Okay, thank you, Massimo. Let's have Sami here, and then a short reflection together. Thank you very much, Sami. So we already heard many references to the excellence of Helsinki, and congratulations on the local elections yesterday. I understand that you have a new incoming mayor. taking over the great task after the previous, who said that Helsinki should be the most functional city in the world, and then he left. So I guess the civil servants and the companies are still there. So that's very exciting. We talk about virtualization. We talk about the digital physical twinning and how to interoperate. And we talk about automotive and mobility. So please introduce yourself, and thanks for the time here. And let's hear what you say.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Sami Sahala from city of Helsinki. Let me share my screen at the same time. How do I do that? Yeah.
Yes, we see you, we hear you,
good.
And we see your slides. Thank you.
Great. So I work at city of Helsinki, but to be precise, something called Forum Virium, which is the city's daughter company for all new innovation. So we are the ones, the propeller heads who try and fail first. We've been doing that for quite a long time. So generic smart city stuff, as well as data IoT, really another cornerstone, and a third one is smart mobility. So trying to look at two different aspects here. Not sure, Marty, you probably know that in Finland we have a habit that the last presentation is always a bit more lighthearted and less serious. So here I am.
No, just a disclaimer, I did not know. In some cultures, it's the last one which kind of wraps up everything in the perfect example. So I would like to see you do that.
All right, I'll try my best. But that also means that I will not be too technical, hopefully. But digital twin has been mentioned quite a few times, as I understand, which can mean different things. But here I'm looking at, I'm not sure if it has a proper word yet, but we are talking about digital twins for mobility, or mobility digital twins. So basically, what is a digital twin for mobility in that mobility context? And that's something that's really interesting for us now. Basically, it should have been a long time, but it's kind of a new thing that's been picked up lately by many cities, and we are now jointly trying to push this. I didn't manage to follow the first part of this this session today too closely, because I was having a meeting with a few other cities on this very same topic. But let's go forward. I basically, you should know what the digital twins are, and I'm just stating the obvious. But let me hear me out. I'll raise a few points. Again, none too technical points. Of course, to start with, many cities, I'd like to say most cities, but I'm not really sure, but at least many cities are developing the digital twins. And basically, that city digital twin is quite often being displayed or present with this kind of pictures, which is the kind of visual representation of the twin itself. In this case, one of the new smart city areas of Helsinki. So you can see it's still being built with different levels of buildings in there. But what is digital twin in terms of city and in terms of mobility? Of course, it is a digital representation of the built environment. So you have everything there that's in real life there as well. Hopefully in really quite accurate format. And then it's supposed to be context sensitive. It's supposed to be semantic, at least. That it means that there's a building, and the database knows that how many stories there are, how many windows. It understands what is a window, for example. And then that's not too relevant for mobility, but from mobility perspective, there are certain assets that are really interesting and relevant, like all the markings, all the lampposts, the traffic lights, here overhead wires. You can see this is linked more to a tram network here, and then it's probably there's more that's missing from digital twins. Thinking of, for example, when you go deeper into detail, let's say you have the side stones of the pavement, for example, and some of them are slanted, and you should know exactly where and in which condition each part of the stone there is, because that's the way where, for example, people in wheelchair need to travel in order to reach, for example, that tram stop over there in the picture. And that's kind of information that we are still missing, and then we are busy, well, we should be busy, but we are trying to come up with next projects to really start building that level of detail that is required for mobility. So that's what it is. That's my version of what digital twins are in mobility. Ask someone else, you may get a little bit different type of answer, but I'm sticking to my version at this point. Of course, then the problem is that means there's more and more data that we need to have. That just doesn't come out of the blue. We should have that as a city. Of course, we should. We may have, like in our case, we may have detailed plans of, say, for example, an intersection. This is exactly what the intersection is like. But then again, that plan may not reflect to what's out there in real life. Has the plan been implemented exactly in the way was it even possible? And for example, regarding, let's say, the example of traffic signs, they may have been previous traffic signs which were not removed. So in order, basically, we should have constant inventory of what's out there. And it's fairly easy to do a digital twin for a city, which is basically designed for, digital twins are mostly, in my opinion, they are mostly for city planning and for architects, so to speak. And what they need is that they do an inventory of the city like once a year. They use that information and the data to do different kind of simulations, planning, whatever they do with that. But from mobility perspective, and depending on different types of use case, that information really needs to be accurate. It needs to be real time. It needs to be absolutely true. And otherwise, for example, the autonomous vehicle that has been mentioned, it just can't drive. Well, it can, but it may not end up nicely in the end. So we need to have like constant update to that part of the digital twin that is relevant for mobility, at least those kind of mobility use cases. So that's challenge number one. Hold on. Then the more on the opportunity side thing is that we do have sensors out there. What we can do is like in the previous picture. This is a picture I stole from a local company in Helsinki. What we normally do is that we put out a public tender. We grant and deal for one company who then does this inventory for us, and then we get all the data exclusively. And that's basically how everything's been working in public sector for decades and decades. Now the question is that the model that we can still use? Sure, we can. But now the opportunity is that there are so many sensors out there, like again being mentioned today, and different types of vehicles, whether they are autonomous, whether they are standard ones, they already are quite nice sensors as well. But moving on to some light vehicles, again, they can be rigged as an IoT platform. We've been trying with that. We even have crowdsourced like portable measurements for air quality, noise, different things that and people are happy to contribute by that. This means that there's almost limitless amount of sensors available. That means that there's so much data available. But if we stick to the traditional model of procurement, we will not have access to that. Or if we would, that would be so costly that basically that's not an option at all. So we need to really start thinking again, not how do we get the data, what we do use with the data, what are the technical things that I do agree that all the standards, they are really and try to like standard operation models as well, that they are really, really critical. At the same time, we again, I promise to take a little bit bigger picture, is that how do we manage this? How do we coordinate this? How do we govern this whole thing? And that's why what we need to do is focus on that. That's what we try to do as well as just building the digital twins at the same time. But basically, what we are after is that we need to look at the procurement models. We need to look at the ownership of data and usage rights and access rights of that to that data. We need to have different kind of collaboration between us and the companies, but also probably between the companies as well, in order to provide that greater value chain that then ends up in something major new data, mass of data that's going to be in that marketplace and create that whole ecosystem around it, so that we can have, we don't have to buy and invest and own everything first. We just need to be able to use it, but so will someone else, private or public as well. And we need to be able to drive this new market around that new data that I'm talking about into that direction, because now we are more or less building this on a say almost on an empty table, but still there's it's an opportunity to do something different here, and that's what we're trying to do, trying to grasp that. So what we need is a digital twin that's really in a whole new level, both in context and the content of the data, in detail, in the kind of widening scope of that data. It needs to have different types of elements there that are not there because it's not being used by or needed by city planning, but we need to bring in new elements that are relevant for mobility. We don't even know everything that we should put there, but again, that's the work that we are now doing and discussing between the cities, that what is digital twin for mobility, what's needed, what are the gaps, and what would be actually my acute question at the moment is that what is needed by third parties that we could have in our digital twin that would help you guys, the third parties, to create some new solutions, because that's ultimately what we need, not just only enhancing the twin for us for our own use as a city, but at least in Helsinki it's even more important that we provide an open platform for third parties to create something new, because that's where the innovation is, that's where the most of the new solutions for the end users, the citizens, actually come from. You should be doing that, not us. So that's basically what I want to say, that we don't know how to do this. We need help. So in short, let's start the discussion, if it's not going on already, on this approach that I'm talking about. We're trying to do that with the cities, together with the cities, but this will not happen by itself. This will not happen by just cities doing it together and then just putting out a few public tenders. Hey, we want a better digital twin for mobility. No, it should be a joint effort and collaboration. With some money exchanging hands, of course, as well. We need to have that, but still, it's a kind of vague idea that, or direction we know that we need to go to, but we are not able to kind of define clearly the target, the goal. And again, that's something that the private and public sector, I know many cities that we are willing to getting involved in that kind of dialogue. So thank you. That's us.
Thank you so much. And I think that was actually a very, very relevant sort of capstone to the discussion here. Basically bringing everything, including not just the market, so the supply side, but also, you know, the quite big role that public sector can spend and or play by spending actually, you know, a lot of money on buying things. And yeah,
no, we
so
need to be enabler And that's what we've been saying in Helsinki for a long time. That it's not that we are a customer for a company. That's one thing, but it's much more important that we are an enabler. And that can take many forms, but that's what we're trying to do.
That's good. And maybe, I mean, for those who don't know, but Helsinki is also, I think, trying to be enabler for other cities. So of course, there's the city collaboration in Finland, but also in Europe and internationally, and I mean, even tomorrow in the global network of local networks, open agile smart cities. Helsinki is the champion for one of them.
I think it's kind of pointless to do something on our own. That's why. Why?
But it's good because then it also, I mean, what I was going to say that you have a specific need, of course, locally, and in this case, so personal data management. Helsinki has what, 900 systems or 800 systems, and half or something contains personal data. And when you've found out whether they do or not, I mean, I'm guessing that public space makes that, difficult. Then you want something that you can, across your portfolio with the many contracts, something that you can actually have that works across. So Helsinki, together with Amsterdam, together with many others and providers, so Vastu Group and so on, have done a lot of work on behalf of many. That was my point.
True. But then the speaking of standardization and actually that leads to scaling, and it's not just that it's easier for us to implement something, to take something new to our use when there's a standardization around, but it helps the third parties, the local companies as well, to scale internationally when there's the other cities are at least somewhat similar in it, so that it's not a completely different type of a landscape where you go with your solution. So there's another reason why we are happy to push standards and open standards. And when it comes to digital twins for mobility, I understand there is actually some of the standardization available coming from the digital twin side. But at the same time, we need to integrate that with the mobility, say more dynamic mobility data, which also has a number of different standards out there, and it all needs to come together in a digital twin. And that's part of the challenge as well.
Indeed, I mean there's a long way from the concrete in Adnan's holes all through the way of the presentations we have seen and up until the more transversal technology discussions. I'm afraid I will have to defer further discussion to if we have time, but actually if you can use the chat, if there's anything burning, let's pile up and prioritize 1-2 questions here. I don't know if there's anything you, Adnan, Andre, Massimo, Sami, Lonneke had to leave. If there's something that you would like, to put out, like, a clear ask for the colleagues or challenge to the colleagues. And I mean, like, 30 seconds, nothing. Like, so we go Adnan, Andre, Massimo, Sami.
Yeah. Thank you again for this splendid opportunity to speak. I think it was really profitable to be here. One of my, I can see a lot of the partners out there are one way or the other linked together. I see people that I've seen before in totally other context being here. And I'm sure that we are all working in the right direction. I think there are some things that we need to do now and some things that needs to be worked on the long pull, if you can say so. So yeah, if you have any interesting things to say or do, please contact me. I think you all have my email address and so on. So we are here to help.
Very good, Edward. Andre.
Yes, I'd like to say again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present here. And yes, I've seen a lot of people here. Thank you for the presentations that the other people have done. It's very interesting to understand the landscape outside of some things that we do and some things that we also do. So thank you very much for that as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email.
Very good. Massimo.
I was thinking the first presentation of Roneken, because you know what she said many times, you know, digital twin, edge and stuff. Martin, we're assisting that many people look into us, the ICT people. In this perspective, we have an important role. Important role because the future will depend from the digital transformation. Let me say, all of us, we're the drivers because we know how to deal with all of the stuff. Many times I have a discussion with the lawyers, but even with the doctors for the hospitals. So all the domains are entering in our arena, let's say, in our area. And I think we have an important responsibility. This is what I want to share with all of you. In order to understand, at the end of the day, we have to, as Sami said, to help the others, because at the end of the day, they are going towards in our direction. It's also bad for them because they are increasing the speed. You know, we change every 6 months. There is something that's different. You know, and now it's coming with the cloud continuum. I remember when we started in Messina, the first project in Europe, Reservoir was more of 10 years ago, and now we continue to go. There is no way to. It's good, no? No way to stop, but we go and increase and we go. This is what is happening. But some point we have to make to be lighthouse for the others. This is what I must say, Martin. And thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Sami.
Well, maybe one thing that came to my mind is that we've seen over the years that in digital domain the business models are changing, so that it's not that again one big deal that we are making as a city, that we buy huge or long even long deals. It's coming in small streams, and especially when it comes to a topic like this, it's a good example that's going to happen. We will again not going to be putting out a huge tender that hey, we want this all in one package from one developer. So that's again, just keep that in mind and then prepare your internal, adjust your internal thinking into that there's the market is going to be a little bit different. That's my message as well.
A warm thank you to all of you in this panel. Thanks for taking your time, and thanks for doing the effort and sharing your thoughts here. And now, of course, the programs are coming out on the European level, and hopefully there should be plenty of opportunity then to explore. The question is then, of course, what's next in the next steps in the roadmap? I mean, not everything is done with, you know, pooling money and putting them somewhere. There's also ways of organizing. There are, you know, policies, there are differences, and there are different networks working together. So let's see, there's plenty of work. Thank you so much. So we are, I think, kind of on time. So we have 10 minutes left, more or less. There's a short part 2 called Visions and Statements, and I'll just share with you here. Okay, so we have the opportunity that you share on the event website statements that you can then present. I don't know if you see my screen here. It should be, yes. And it's basically, you know, just at the bottom of the program for today, there's a statement. Submit statement thing. And a couple of people did that. So first of all, I want to hear, are any of the people in the audience here? Then please share your screen or write in the chat, because then I will let you present your own statement. Okay, so Carlos, I give you priority for being here. Okay, so while I paste the link to this page in the chat, perhaps you can just very briefly introduce yourself and very briefly give your statement.
Can you share? Let me share my screen.
I can do that. It has to be a very, very quick thing
you
do.
Sure.
So as long as we are on the very quick comments. So now you should be able to share the screen.
Okay. So you should be able to see my screen, I think. Perhaps.
Yes.
Okay, so just a couple of words. Well, I'm Carlos Guardiola from the Universitat Politécnica de Valencia, and actually I'm part of the Assist IoT European project, which is within the next generation IoT ecosystem. So we are there, and I just wanted to point out well, the things we are doing about the automotive connectivity, and just pointing out actually, I think it's quite straightforward with the things we are seeing. We look for decentralized system, we look for edge cloud computing, and we try to put things together. But instead of looking for, let's say, very future applications, and well, I'm sure electrical car is there, and that connectivity will be important. But I want to point out that would be also important for the current industry. So we are just tackling problems concerning vehicle real life emission data and how to integrate this into city management and legislation, how to provide real life data for the legislator, and being able, on one hand, to provide this data and monitoring the fleet, on the other hand, to being able to put the internal combustion engine under monitoring and being able to change the calibration for adapting for the real emissions, and finally applying advancing diagnostics. Okay, I think this could be the short 2 minutes.
Okay, very good. So thanks for this, and maybe just if we have the statement here. So your statement is, if I can read it, the connected vehicle paradigm allows a complete reshaping of the vehicle control and diagnostics with impact at fleet, vehicle, and components level. So I think the key word here is paradigm shift. A lot will happen. Thank you so much, Carlos. We also have a statement from Olof Eriksson from Veoneer. Future automotive safety requires many more sources of information than today. Aha, many more sources to create a common useful perception of traffic scenarios at hand. So essentially, it will be more complicated. And finally, from Johan Brenninger, I think Johan was in the audience earlier, maybe still, the statement from BMW. The IoT and edge technologies are made available, and the platform standardization play an elementary. Aha, Johan, sorry, I should not be reading your excellent quote.
So that's fine, Martin. Thank you very much. I do not have prepare any slides here because we are just too overwhelmed with these, let's say, possibilities we face today. What I've learned from today's event is that I think a lot of technologies are here and are all more or less relatively pragmatic. Now, we certainly go for, let's say, a central architecture with a lot of data sharing. For Gaia X was mentioned. I think that's pretty amazing what's happening here. But to be honest, our industry is not really able to compete with these dynamics in the field. So what I see is that it must be something like a partnership between the big ones like us and the universities, the research partners, and smaller enterprises who do a lot in this field and working together. And I think what's on the table now is really sharing data, sharing insights, and going to piloting, trying to do pilots. And with these pilots, we learn a lot, and we may able to be scaling up. And that's I would say the story, what I take with me and bring to our management today. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you so much, Johan. Also, and maybe we can also say that you have been following also the large-scale pilots and the European projects very closely. So it's good to see also that industry is so interested in what's happening on the earlier stages. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, so now we have essentially one thing left. So those were the short statements, and we have some steps. We have a roadmap to make, and as noted before, so we write up essentially, these thematic work groups. We write as an annex to be shared in the final roadmap in October. But of course, we already now are very happy to share what are the, let's say, the salient points that are coming out of this. But don't expect a roadmap like right now, but after summer. But we continue, of course, to engage with the colleagues, as said before. So with that, I think, Rolf, it's our reflections for the ending. If you allow me, I will just give a few observations, and I think also it really relates a lot back to the work that we have done, not just in the NGIoT roadmap domain, but also what has happened, on the experimentation and testing side. So the early technology readiness levels and the more like scaling up close to market previous. So just to add some reflections here. But what I'm seeing is so I put this in red, yellow, and green, yellow, and red, because I think we actually understand the technology parts quite well. So we know that they are data spaces. They don't float in free air. They have, they're in platforms. And at some point, the models there become so complex that we can call them virtualization of some process or some subsystems. So, well, maybe that is what the twin is when complexity just reaches that scale. It's green because we actually understand that from a technical perspective quite well, I think. We also understand that digital twins aren't just about, mapping one-to-one the world. It's very much, as you also said, Sami, about the semantics. Actually, most of the value is in the semantics of the semantic interop among these virtualized nuggets. Okay, so that is the, let's say, the 3D Internet of Things, or whatever you want to call it. Then this happens along the computing continuum. You could call it the operation technology, the IT, whatever, but from the far edge all the way up to the cloud and the high performance computing, where you have lots of resource. And of course, on the edge, you have very limited resource, but also you are in a situation where you can get data very quickly. You can act on data very quickly. And there was this, so what you said, Sami, okay, so urban planners, maybe they need an update once a year, but actually there's also a time scale called forever, because some of the data that we capture in our societies, they need to be archived forever in like the National Archive or wherever that goes, under the whatever stone you have designated as the National Archive. So we're still understanding that, but it's well understood in some aspects. The orchestration, okay, who does it? But what's really difficult is whoever operates this, and this includes also the market around it. So we know how to share data, you learn linked open data and all of that jazz. We know how to build good platforms that operate, with content delivery, instant gratification, high, small, whatever bandwidth globally. We know the GAFAMs, we know the Chinese counterparts, and we see sort of sectoral, but they operate on very particular terms. And then for the complex virtualization modeling, of course, we have on the modeling side, we know from manufacturing, from building information management, from the geospatial, well, it's actually particular people who do that. They're not necessarily the ones who build platforms or even do business on top of these things. So, and then we have the virtualization. We have people, I live very close to Lars, who created the Java virtual machine. I mean, that was a revolution. Suddenly you could run things embedded. And so the virtualization, and who does it? Who does it? Who deploys? Who builds? Who buys? Who sells? Who regulates? That's really, really complex. And then I didn't even start on the governance levels. So we're looking into a quite complex landscape. And well, you can say, luckily, I think the Horizon Europe and the Digital Europe programs, together with the Connecting Europe facilities and many other things, are actually addressing this quite well. And we have, I mean, I'm not going to go any kind of detail, but just to say that previous efforts, including, I mean, also coming from your unit, Rolf, like Organisty and Synchronicity have been mentioned before as sort of sister or brother efforts to many of the things. I mean, yeah, sure, we've done lots of things, but then how does this come together? And there is, well, some efforts both in Europe and globally. And of course, we need to find out how does this not just become an all-out battle for the ownership. Adnan, you mentioned the Danish guide just because it was one example here as what is being done. So this is the Danish guide to sustainable digital transformation. And of course, it's meant across verticals. So I'm not going to go any kind of detail, but that's actually been contributions from utilities, from academia, from municipalities, from national government, from technology providers, consultants, and so on. So, I mean, data clearly is the thing, but then how do we do that? And then, since Sami, you also mentioned, so well, several of you said, okay, so what are these bits and pieces that we need in every system? And well, those of you who know what I do also, I mean, from the cities side, so the open agile smart cities and the minimal interoperability mechanisms. So the interaction where systems connect, the integrity, so that we know on which terms and how we treat automated decisions and personal data and security, and how we can ensure the impact that we want. I mean, there is some work, and this is here, MIM 4, where Helsinki is the champion, and MIM 5 on fair artificial intelligence, that's Amsterdam, and so on. MIM 1, the main reference is NGIoT and the set building block, right? the data models and architecture cut across, and of course, places, so MIM 7 here, geospatial, that's in a partnership with OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is linked to Inspire and so on. So just to say, there's a lot of work happening across the sectors, across all the locations where this technology needs to be deployed, but also across verticals. So thank you for giving me those reflections and the opportunity to reflect into what I'm seeing in well, the other themes as well. Rolf, I think we are towards the end. Do you want to share your thoughts and reflections here?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I don't dare to switch on the video because my internet connection is not stable today. I'm very sorry for that.
No worries.
First of all, many thanks for the organizers and those who presented today and participated in the discussion. It was a very stimulating discussion. I think we were quite encompassing, around some, as you mentioned, a complex area technology field, which is emerging still. And an application domain which is in a change, not even to say in a disruption. I think we touched upon particular different aspects. For years, we're working in the Internet of Things. We're discussing the next generation of Internet of Things. And what it's about, I think today there was a good opportunity to learn about what's new. I think we heard about marketplaces. I know that if you connect objects, if you connect things, that we have to take care of the data, and we have to take care of the access of the data and the value creation and the business model of what we call marketplaces. But actually, the IoT in the edge is a different beast, in the sense that it's not only on a marketplace, not only it's complicated enough, because we're still working on data spaces, but it also involves sort of a redesign of hardware. We've heard that discussion about the car, the new sensor on the car, then the terabytes of data produced by the car. We heard about a computer on wheels, the new challenges of designing the car as a new generation of a smartphone or a new generation of a connected computer. And we are particularly interested, how does this new agile architecture deal with its environment, its connected environment? The roadside infrastructure, the user, as well as the cloud backend. So it was quite evident that if you want to go for something new, we have to think across sectors. It's not only the automotive sector, not only mobility in the city. It may encompass as well buildings, logistics, energy, home offices. I think that all comes together, and that cumulates, particularly if you go for electromobility. I think that we heard many times. And if you ask me now, what's really the new kid on the block? Yeah, the new kid on the block is hardware. Hardware which could be a charging pole or a wall box at home. Somebody has to invest. And I think Aaron made a good question. We're adding value, we're adding innovation to the car, to any of the things, which is a piece of hardware. Yes, combined with software, but still, and somebody has to pay for it. I think we need a value creation for that one. If you switch to e-mobility, it's not just as daily, it's changing your habits or changing your meal. It's a long-term decision, and the people who make the decision in the infrastructure or in the new way of mobility need to know, what is my value I get out of that. We tackled around that if you go for a new hardware, new software, you need this sort of inclusive role on the inclusive view of new interoperability and standards. I think without that, you're jumping into an investment, and it may not be sustainable, and it's fragmented, and we hear that again and again. And it's our role in Europe, but also from the national point of view, to support us in order to tackle that discussion, to initiate the discussion, and to address that again and again, that at least in Europe we put our stakes together. This calls for new innovation on hardware and software, on systems and system design, but essentially also, as it was mentioned also from Johan, a dialogue and a partnership, engaging in partnership, enabling the new economic models, and seeing which comes first. Yes, I think we are under pressure with the crisis, with the investment in infrastructure. But said this, we have to avoid that with the investment, that we avoid, that we make solutions which are rested in a silo, which we make solutions which are not interoperable, that we have fragmentation across Europe, and we need to steer the discussion, around, how to create systems in a fraction of time which are interoperable and which sort of also drive global standards, particularly also in mobility and automotive. So I think that is my takeaway from today. I'm pretty much aware that with supporting research and innovation in IoT and Edge, it's a challenge. It will come, maybe after 5 years' time in order to resolve the different issues. But it's a unique opportunity, a moment in time now to start about that one, to talk about cross-sector, and to support European suppliers, component suppliers, and system designers, but to keep a holistic view on the cross-sector view, achieving the targets of the Green Deal, and also driving the discussion on global standards. And that's my take on. I know we are just at the starting point. I think even before the launch of the call, there was a very good opportunity to reflect on the different aspects. I think we made sort of we've seen the broad spectrum today, and there are new technologies ahead, and I hope, we stay in touch and continue the discussion with you. Many thanks to Martin and his team for the organization and for the others, and hope to stay in touch and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rolf. And I think all that is left for us to do here is also, managing the slides, but basically just saying that thanks also for the Commission for giving this opportunity to bring, actors together, but also networks, as we know that we need to organize and so on. So thanks a lot. And yes, please link up and join up for exploiting the roadmap. And well, we look forward to seeing you back after summer. And also please do check back regularly to the NGIoT.eu website, and there's a newsletter being sent out continuously. So it all continues. And if you want, we can just put everybody's, I don't know if you dare, Rolf, but we can put everybody's camera on. So I see you, Francois, you're already there, but maybe just to say goodbye to everyone. It's nice to see the faces as you walk out the door, yeah? Unfortunately, you can't go for a coffee or a beer, but soon. I got my Corona passport today active because I got my first shot 2 weeks ago. So now inside Denmark, I can go around actually without a mask as well. So times are changing. Thanks a lot, everyone, and talk soon.